Life or death, that's the choice Deku would force on everyone. Imagine Izuku Midoriya with the terrifying power to rip souls from bodies, command living armies, and decide your fate with a single glare. Will you give me your lifespan, or will I take it by force? This isn't about being the #1 hero anymore. This is about becoming the ultimate judge of mortality itself. When kindness meets the power of a soul emperor, does heroism survive or does it die? The answer might shock you.
Welcome, Legends, to Chronos Recom. I wrote this story myself, so if you have any suggestions or what-ifs you want to see, drop it in the comments below. Also, just wanted to let you know I've got a Patreon set up now for anyone who wants to support the channel directly. You can get early access to stories, submit direct fan requests, and get exclusive content. It's totally optional, but if you want to help keep these stories coming, check it out. Links in the description. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit that bell so you never miss an upload. Let's dive into this story.
The night sky fractured with lightning as rain pelted the streets of Musutafu. Most citizens had retreated indoors, seeking shelter from the storm. But in a dimly lit alley, 4-year-old Izuku Midoriya stood unflinching, emerald eyes locked on the villain who towered before him. "What's a kid doing out here alone?" The villain's voice rasped through the metallic filter of his gas mask. His quirk had already manifested, toxic fumes swirling around his fingertips, ready to deploy. "Go home before you get hurt." But Izuku didn't move. The rain seemed to avoid him somehow, droplets diverging around his small frame as if repelled by an invisible force. The boy's expression remained eerily calm. "You hurt that woman," Izuku said, his voice carrying a weight beyond his ears. "You took her purse." The villain laughed, the sound distorted through his mask. "And what are you going to do about it, kid? Play hero!" He stepped closer, toxic vapor coiling around his arms. Thunder cracked overhead, illuminating Izuku's face. His eyes reflected no fear, only cold judgment. "Life or death?" The words left Izuku's lips with terrifying simplicity. The villain hesitated, confused by the child's strange question. "What are you?" Izuku's hand shot forward, and something inexplicable happened. The air between them distorted, rippling like heat waves over asphalt. The villain's body jerked backward as if struck, his mask clattering to the ground. His mouth opened in a silent scream as a translucent, bluish substance began to pull away from his chest, his soul manifesting as a tangible entity. What are you doing to me?" Terror replaced the villain's confidence as he felt his very essence being extracted. "You chose poorly," Izuku replied, his small hand closing into a fist. With that gesture, the soul fully separated from the villain's body, which collapsed to the wet pavement. The glowing essence hovered above Izuku's palm. He studied it momentarily before looking to the storm clouds above. With a flick of his wrist, the soul shot upward, merging with the thunderhead. The cloud pulsed once, twice, then eyes formed within it, followed by a jagged mouth. "Master," the cloud rumbled, its voice like distant thunder. "I live to serve." "Zeus," Izuku named it immediately. "You'll be my thundercloud." The newly formed homie circled above him, electricity crackling around its form. Izuku turned his attention back to the villain, who lay gasping on the ground, alive, but permanently weakened, missing the fragment of soul now powering his creation. "Remember this," Izuku said, his voice carrying over the storm. "Remember the Soul Emperor." The name came to him naturally, a title fitting for what he was becoming. As he walked away, Zeus trailing overhead like a loyal pet, Izuku felt no remorse. The path of a hero sometimes required darkness to combat greater evils, and he had just taken his first step. 10 years passed. The name Soul Emperor echoed through Musutafu's underworld, whispered with reverence and fear. What began with a single thundercloud homie had evolved into an arsenal of soul-powered creations. Zeus remained Izuku's first and most powerful, but others had joined. Prometheus, a sun homie that radiated intense heat. Napoleon, a sword homie that could cut through steel like butter. And dozens more, each crafted from the souls of villains who chose death when offered the ultimatum. At 14, Izuku Midoriya stood on a rooftop overlooking the city. He had grown tall for his age, though nowhere near the monstrous size of the pirate queen whose powers he mirrored. His green hair had darkened somewhat, and his freckles remained, creating an odd juxtaposition with the intimidating aura he projected. He wore a simple, dark uniform of his own design, practical for combat with no flamboyant elements or childish aesthetic. Zeus hovered near his shoulder while Prometheus floated at his other side, casting an orange glow across his features. Napoleon hung at his hip, its hilt occasionally shifting as the sentient sword adjusted itself. "There's movement at the harbor," Zeus rumbled, electricity dancing across its cloudy form. "The weapons shipment you mentioned?" Izuku nodded. "The League of Villains grows bolder. They think their operations go unnoticed." His voice had deepened, but maintained that eerie, commanding quality that made even hardened criminals pause. "We'll correct that assumption tonight." He stepped off the rooftop, dropping 30 feet to the street below. The impact should have shattered his legs, but Izuku landed with perfect control, the pavement cracking beneath his feet. His body possessed the same inexplicable durability as the rest of his power set, the iron balloon defense that made conventional attacks all but useless against him. The harbor was nearly 2 miles away, but Izuku covered the distance quickly, moving with unnatural speed. Zeus kept pace above him, occasionally illuminating the path with brief flashes of lightning. When they arrived, Izuku observed the scene from the shadows. A cargo ship had docked, and figures moved around it with practiced efficiency, unloading crates and transferring them to waiting vehicles. Izuku counted 15 villains, most likely with combat-oriented quirks. Their leader stood apart, directing operations with sharp hand gestures. Izuku recognized him immediately. Razor, a B-rank villain known for blade-generating abilities and involvement in arms trafficking. His presence confirmed the intelligence that had led Izuku here. "Zeus," Izuku whispered, "create a perimeter. No one leaves." The thundercloud expanded, encircling the entire dock with dark, roiling mass. Prometheus hovered higher, ready to provide illumination when needed. Napoleon hummed softly at Izuku's side, eager for combat. Rather than attempting stealth, Izuku walked directly into the open, his footsteps echoing on the concrete. The operation halted as 15 sets of eyes turned toward him. "It's just some kid," one villain muttered, though uncertainty tinged his voice. Razor's eyes narrowed. "No," he said, recognition dawning. "It's him, the Soul Emperor." A wave of tension rippled through the group. Some reached for weapons, others activated their quirks defensively. Izuku continued his steady approach, stopping 30 feet from Razor. "Illegal weapons," Izuku stated, gesturing toward the crates. "Destined for villain hands. This operation ends now." Razor forced a laugh, though fear flickered behind his eyes. "You've got a reputation, kid, I'll give you that. But you're outnumbered here, even with your pets." He nodded toward Zeus and Prometheus. "Numbers mean nothing," Izuku replied calmly. He raised his hand, extending it toward the group. "Life or death? Choose now." The ultimatum hung in the air. Some of the newer recruits looked confused, but the veterans among them tensed, understanding the dire significance of those words. "Kill him!" Razor shouted, slashing his arm through the air. Dozens of razor-sharp projectiles materialized and hurtled toward Izuku. The blades struck their target directly, then bounced harmlessly off Izuku's body, clattering to the ground around him. He hadn't moved, hadn't flinched. His expression remained unchanged. "Death it is," he said simply. Zeus roared to life, unleashing a massive bolt of lightning that struck the ground in the middle of the group. The explosion sent villains flying in all directions. Prometheus dove into the fray, its heat causing metal to warp and rubber to melt. Napoleon leapt from its sheath, the sword homie extending to twice its normal length as it swept through the air in a devastating arc. Izuku walked forward methodically as chaos erupted around him. A villain with stone-like skin charged him from the side, fist raised for a crushing blow. Without looking, Izuku caught the punch in his palm, stopping the much larger man instantly. The villain's eyes widened in shock before Izuku's other hand thrust forward, fingers splayed. "Life or death?" Izuku asked again, but didn't wait for an answer. His power activated, pulling a glowing fragment of soul from the villain's chest. The man collapsed, and the soul piece floated before Izuku momentarily before he directed it into a nearby shipping container. The metal box shuddered, then sprouted eyes and a mouth. Master, the new homie rumbled in a deep, metallic voice. Contain them, Izuku commanded. The shipping container homie expanded, opening its mouth wide as it began pursuing fleeing villains. Razor had recovered from the initial shock and now rushed at Izuku, both arms transformed into gleaming blade arrays. You monster, he screamed, slashing with precision and fury. Each strike connected with Izuku's body but failed to penetrate. It was like attacking solid steel. Izuku allowed the assault to continue for several seconds, his expression betraying nothing as Razor's attacks grew increasingly desperate. Are you finished? Izuku asked finally. Razor stumbled back, panting, What are you? I am what villains like you create, Izuku replied. He extended his hand once more. Life or death? Final offer. Terror gripped Razor's features as he realized his fate. He turned to run, but Zeus descended from above, cutting off his escape with a wall of electricity. No one escapes the Soul Emperor, Izuku said, his voice carrying across the battlefield where his homies had already subdued most of the other villains. He approached Razor slowly, deliberately. Your soul will serve a better purpose under my command. Razor's scream was cut short as Izuku's power activated. The extraction was more significant this time, taking not just a fragment but nearly half of the villain's soul. The glowing essence writhed in Izuku's grip as he examined it. Strong will, he noted. You'll make an excellent addition. The soul fragment shot toward Napoleon, merging with the sword homie. Napoleon glowed brightly, its blade edge gaining a serrated pattern that mimicked Razor's quirk. Thank you, Master, Napoleon spoke, its voice sharper than before. I feel enhanced. Izuku surveyed the aftermath. Brance's 13 villains lay unconscious or severely weakened from partial soul extraction. The shipping container homie had corralled most of them inside itself. Zeus, Prometheus, and the newly enhanced Napoleon hovered nearby, awaiting further instructions. Contact the police, Izuku instructed Zeus, who produced a small electrical discharge that interfaced with a nearby communication terminal. Tell them the Soul Emperor has left them a delivery. As sirens wailed in the distance, Izuku turned to leave. His work tonight was done, but the larger mission continued. The League of Villains would notice this disruption. They would respond, and when they did, he would be ready. The path to becoming the greatest hero required strength and will that most couldn't comprehend. Where All Might inspired with his smile and conventional heroics, Izuku would forge a different legacy, one built on fear, power, and absolute justice. The Soul Emperor would reshape what it meant to be a hero, whether society was ready for it or not. The following morning, Izuku sat across from his mother at their modest apartment's breakfast table. Izuku Midoriya had aged considerably in the decades since her son's quirk manifested. Her once vibrant green hair now showed streaks of gray, and worry lines had permanently etched themselves around her eyes. She placed a bowl of rice before him, her hands trembling slightly. I saw the news, she said quietly. The harbor incident. That was you, wasn't it? Izuku nodded, taking a bite of his food. A weapons shipment for the League. I intercepted it. Inko's hands clutched at her apron. Izuku, you're only 14. These villain organizations, they're dangerous. You should leave this to the professional heroes. Professional heroes operate within limitations, Izuku replied calmly. I don't share those constraints. This conversation was not new. Over the years, Inko had watched her son transform from a sweet, hero-worshipping child into something both magnificent and terrifying. She loved him fiercely, but fear had become a constant companion. Not fear of him, but for him, and occasionally of what he might become. The UA entrance exam is in 3 months, she said, changing subjects. Have you decided if you'll attend? Izuku considered this. UA High School represented the pinnacle of hero education, but he had long since surpassed what most of their instructors could teach him. Still, legitimacy had its advantages. I'll take the exam, he decided. A hero license will reduce complications. Relief washed over Inko's features. Perhaps at UA, surrounded by peers and proper guidance, some of Izuku's sharper edges might soften. It was a mother's hope, however unlikely. You'll need to control your methods during the exam, she cautioned. They might not understand. Izuku's expression remained neutral. I understand restraint, Mother. I'll adapt as necessary. Outside the window, Zeus hovered patiently, its cloudy form condensed to the size of a small cushion to avoid drawing attention. The homie had become Izuku's constant companion, rarely leaving his side. Most people assumed it was simply part of his quirk, a manifestation rather than a separate entity created from a villain's soul. After breakfast, Izuku changed into training clothes and headed to an abandoned industrial area he had claimed as his practice ground. Here, away from civilian eyes, he could exercise the full extent of his abilities without restriction. Several homies awaited him there, lesser creations that maintained the facility and assisted with training. They bowed as he entered, their various forms ranging from animated machinery to personified elements. "Master," they acknowledged in unison. Izuku nodded to them before moving to the center of the cavernous space. Zeus expanded to its full combat size, while Prometheus and Napoleon materialized from where they had been waiting. "Today we focus on coordination," Izuku announced. "The entrance exam will likely involve artificial enemies. We'll need to adapt our usual methods." For the next several hours, Izuku drilled complex maneuvers with his homies. Zeus practiced precise lightning strikes that disabled rather than destroyed. Prometheus learned to create heat barriers that contained rather than incinerated. Napoleon refined non-lethal striking techniques that could incapacitate without cutting. Throughout the training, Izuku pushed himself physically as well. Though his iron balloon defense made him nearly invulnerable, he maintained peak physical condition through rigorous exercise. His strength had grown exponentially over the years, allowing him to shatter concrete with a single punch or leap, incredible distances without effort. As he completed his 500th one-armed push-up, a notification chimed from his phone. Izuku paused, retrieving the device with his free hand. The screen displayed a news alert: "Villain attack in progress, shopping district." Izuku stood, tucking the phone away. "Training concluded for today," he announced to his homies. "We have work to do." Within minutes, they were airborne. Izuku standing atop Zeus as the thundercloud carried him swiftly toward the shopping district. Prometheus raced ahead as a scout, while Napoleon remained sheathed at Izuku's hip. They arrived to find chaos. A villain with a gigantification quirk was rampaging through the area, his massive form smashing through storefronts and tossing vehicles aside. Several professional heroes had responded, but were struggling to contain the destruction. Izuku assessed the situation from above. The villain stood approximately 15 meters tall, with enhanced musculature and rhinoceros-like skin. Present at the scene were Death Arms, Backdraft, and Kamui Woods. Competent heroes, but clearly outmatched by the villain's raw power. "Zeus, descend," Izuku commanded. The thundercloud lowered him into the midst of the confrontation. As his feet touched the ground, the professional heroes turned in surprise. "Civilian, you need to evacuate," Death Arms called out, not immediately recognizing who had arrived. Kamui Woods, however, tensed visibly. "Soul Emperor," he said, the name carrying a mixture of respect and unease. "This is an official hero operation. Your involvement is not." "Your operation is failing," Izuku interrupted flatly. "Stand aside." Before further argument could ensue, the giant villain noticed the new arrival and laughed thunderously. "Another insect to crush," he bellowed, charging forward with earth-shaking steps. Izuku didn't move as the massive fist descended toward him. The professional heroes shouted warnings, but he remained perfectly still. When the blow connected, the result defied expectation. The villain's fist stopped as if it had struck solid bedrock, while Izuku hadn't budged an inch. Shock registered on the giant's face. "What the?" "Life or death?" Izuku asked, looking up at the villain with cold eyes. The villain responded by raising his other fist for another strike. "Die, you little—" "Death it is," Izuku concluded. Zeus expanded dramatically, engulfing the villain's upper body in storm clouds. Lightning discharged within the cloud mass, causing the giant to convulse and scream. Simultaneously, Prometheus circled the villain's legs, its heat weakening the rhinoceros-like skin. Izuku leapt upward with inhuman strength, ascending to eye level with the villain. Napoleon extended in his grip, the blade glowing with energy as he slashed across the giant's chest. Not to cut flesh, but to create an opening for what came next. "Your power would be wasted on common destruction," Izuku declared, thrusting his free hand forward. The soul extraction began immediately, pulling a substantial fragment from the villain's body. The giant shrieked, his size diminishing as his soul was partially removed. He collapsed to his knees, then fell forward onto the street, now reduced to merely twice normal human size. Izuku landed beside the fallen villain, the extracted soul fragment hovering above his palm. The professional heroes approached cautiously, their expressions a mixture of relief and discomfort. You took his quirk? Death Arms asked hesitantly. No, Izuku replied. I took part of his soul. His quirk remains but weakened, as is he. He'll live, but he won't threaten anyone again. Kamui Woods stepped forward. That's not how licensed heroes operate. There are protocols, regulations. Your regulations allowed this destruction. Izuku gestured to the devastated shopping district. My methods prevented further damage and casualties. He turned his attention to the soul fragment, studying it momentarily before directing it toward a nearby traffic light that had been knocked over. The metal pole shuddered before eyes formed on its signal housing, followed by a mouth. Master, the new homie spoke, its voice mechanical yet distinctly alive. Secure him, Izuku instructed, pointing to the fallen villain. The traffic light homie wrapped itself around the unconscious giant, binding him securely. Backdraft approached cautiously. The police will handle it from here, Soul Emperor. Though your assistance was effective, I must remind you that unauthorized quirk usage is permissible in emergencies when licensed heroes are unable to resolve the situation, Izuku finished for him. I'm familiar with the law, Backdraft. Are you familiar with failure? The harsh words hung in the air as Izuku turned away. Zeus descended beside him, ready to depart. 3 months, Izuku said over his shoulder. After the UA entrance exam, I'll have a license. Then we'll see if your objections hold any weight. He stepped onto Zeus, and the thundercloud rose rapidly, carrying him away from the scene. Below, civilians who had witnessed the confrontation pointed upward, some with awe, others with unease. The name Soul Emperor spread through the crowd in hushed whispers. Izuku paid them no mind. Public opinion meant little compared to results. And today's results spoke for themselves. Another villain neutralized, another homie added to his growing arsenal, and another step toward reshaping how justice operated in this society. As they soared over the city, Prometheus rejoined them, the sun homie's warm glow contrasting with Zeus's stormy presence. The exam approaches. Master, Prometheus observed, its voice like crackling flames. Are you truly concerned about passing? Passing is assured, Izuku replied. The question is whether UA is prepared for me. Few institutions, hero or otherwise, were truly ready for the Soul Emperor, but readiness was not his concern. Izuku Midoriya had a destiny to fulfill, and neither bureaucracy nor convention would stand in his way. The weeks leading up to the UA entrance exam passed quickly. Izuku continued his patrols, intercepting villain activities across Musutafu with ruthless efficiency. His reputation grew with each encounter. Professional heroes maintained their public disapproval of his methods, while privately acknowledging the results. Villains increasingly fled at the mere rumor of his approach. On the morning of the exam, Izuku prepared methodically. He dressed in simple athletic wear, dark green tracksuit with black accents, practical and unrestrictive. Zeus had condensed to the size of a small cloud that could perch on his shoulder without drawing excessive attention. Prometheus and Napoleon would remain nearby, but out of sight unless needed. Remember, Inko said as she straightened his collar, maternal concern evident in her eyes, this is different from your usual activities. There will be rules, structure, other students. I understand, Izuku replied. I'll adapt accordingly. Inko searched his face, looking for some sign of the gentle boy he had once been. Sometimes in quiet moments like this, she caught glimpses of him beneath the Soul Emperor's impassive exterior. I'm proud of you, she said finally. Whatever path you choose, I'll support you. Izuku nodded, the closest he came to displaying affection these days. I'll return after the exam. The journey to UA was uneventful. Other exam participants filled the streets, easily identifiable by their nervous energy and practice materials. Izuku observed them dispassionately. Potential classmates, perhaps, though few would likely match his capabilities. As he approached the imposing gates of UA High School, a familiar voice called out behind him. Midoriya! Izuku turned to see Katsuki Bakugo approaching, his expression a complex mixture of resentment and grudging respect. Their relationship had transformed dramatically since childhood. Where once Bakugo had bullied a quirkless Izuku, The manifestation of the Soul Emperor's powers had forced a radical reassessment. Now they existed in a state of cold détente. Not friends, but no longer enemies. Bakugo, Izuku acknowledged with a slight nod. "Don't hold back in there," Bakugo said, his voice challenging despite the wary look in his eyes. "I want to see exactly where I stand compared to you." "You already know where you stand," Izuku replied, matter-of-factly. It wasn't a taunt or boast, simply a statement of reality as he perceived it. Bakugo's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more as they entered the campus together. Other applicants gave them a wide berth, some recognizing Izuku from news reports or social media videos that had captured his interventions. The written portion of the exam passed without incident. Izuku completed it efficiently, his analytical mind processing the questions with ease. While his focus had shifted toward combat in recent years, he maintained excellent academic performance through disciplined study. It was the practical exam that truly interested him. The applicants gathered in an enormous auditorium where Present Mike explained the parameters. Robots of varying difficulty levels would serve as targets, with points awarded based on the level of enemy defeated. Remember, folks, Present Mike's voice boomed through the space. This is about heroic combat. Property damage should be minimized, and attacking other applicants is strictly prohibited. Izuku noted these restrictions, making mental adjustments to his usual approach. As the explanation concluded, applicants were directed to designated battle centers. Izuku was assigned to Battle Center B, while Bakugo was sent to A deliberate separation of top candidates, he suspected. In the preparation area, Izuku stood apart from the other nervous examinees. Zeus remained perched on his shoulder, drawing curious glances but no direct questions. Most gave him a wide berth, his reputation preceding him. One exception was a tall boy with engines protruding from his calves, who approached with formal rigidity. "You are Izuku Midoriya, the vigilante known as Soul Emperor, correct?" The boy asked, his voice carrying throughout the room and causing others to turn and stare. "I am Izuku Midoriya," he confirmed, meeting the boy's gaze steadily. "The rest is public knowledge." "I am Tenya Ida, from Some Private Academy," the boy introduced himself with mechanical hand gestures. "While I cannot condone your extralegal activities, I must acknowledge your effectiveness. However, I must warn you that UA adheres to strict protocols regarding appropriate heroic conduct." Izuku regarded him impassively. Noted. Before Ida could continue his lecture, the gates to Battle Center B slid open and Present Mike's voice echoed through speakers. "Begin!" While other examinees hesitated in surprise, Izuku moved immediately. Zeus expanded beneath him, lifting him high above the replica city streets for a strategic overview. He quickly identified concentrations of robot enemies and mapped an efficient route. "There," he directed, and Zeus descended rapidly toward a cluster of three-pointer robots. Izuku landed in their midst, his impact cracking the pavement. The robots registered his presence and turned to attack, mechanical limbs whirring as they converged on him. He stood motionless as the first robot struck, its metal fist colliding with his chest and crumpling like aluminum foil against his iron balloon defense. "Zeus," Izuku commanded simply. The thundercloud expanded, engulfing three robots simultaneously. Lightning discharged within its mass, the electrical current overloading the machine's circuits. They collapsed in smoking heaps as Zeus retreated back to Izuku's side. Other examinees arrived at the scene, staring in shock at the destroyed robots and the imposing figure standing among them. Izuku paid them no mind, already moving toward his next targets. For the next several minutes, he methodically eliminated robot after robot. Zeus disabled groups with precision lightning strikes. When more durable models appeared, Izuku handled them personally, shattering metal with punches that could crumble concrete, tearing through armored plating as if it were paper. He maintained a precise count, 47 points and climbing. The other examinees alternated between watching in awe and scrambling to find their own targets before the green-haired destroyer claimed them all. Tenya Ida, despite his earlier misgivings, couldn't help but be impressed by the efficiency on display. "His quirk control is remarkable," he muttered to himself as he used his engine quirk to kick through a two-pointer. Not a single wasted motion. The ground suddenly trembled beneath their feet. Buildings shook as an enormous zero-pointer robot, the obstacle mentioned by Present Mike, emerged from behind a skyscraper. Standing easily 10 stories tall, it rolled forward on massive treads, crushing everything in its path. Most examinees turned and ran, heeding Present Mike's advice about the pointless behemoth. Izuku, however, remained in place, assessing the situation coldly. The zero-pointer represented no point value, but it did offer an opportunity to demonstrate capability. His calculation was interrupted by a cry of pain. A brown-haired girl was trapped beneath rubble near the zero-pointer's path, struggling to free herself as the massive machine approached inexorably. Without hesitation, Izuku moved. Zeus carried him swiftly to the girl's position, where he effortlessly lifted the concrete slabs pinning her legs. "Can you walk?" he asked directly. I think my ankle's sprained," she replied, wincing. Izuku nodded, then turned toward the advancing zero-pointer. "Zeus, get her to safety." The thundercloud condensed around the girl, lifting her gently and moving her away from danger. Izuku then faced the robot directly, its massive form now looming just 50 meters away. "Napoleon," he called, and the sword homie materialized at his side, extending to its full length. Izuku took the blade in hand and focused his power. The sword glowed with energy as he raised it overhead. "Ikoku's sovereignty," he intoned, bringing the blade down in a single devastating slash. The air itself seemed to split as a crescent-shaped energy wave erupted from Napoleon's edge, traveling forward with incredible speed. It struck the zero-pointer at mid-height, cleaving through metal, circuitry, and structural supports with equal ease. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the upper half of the robot began to slide away from the lower, the clean cut becoming visible as the separated pieces fell in opposite directions. Silence fell over Battle Center B as the dust settled. The bisected zero-pointer lay in ruins, its destruction so complete and efficient that even the UA staff monitoring the exam exchanged looks of astonishment. "Time's up!" Present Mike's voice eventually broke the stunned quiet. Izuku sheathed Napoleon, the homie returning to its dormant state. Zeus returned to his side, having safely delivered the injured girl to the entrance. Other examinees stared at him with expressions ranging from awe to fear. None approached. Except for one. The brown-haired girl he had rescued limped forward, supported by another examinee. "Thank you," she said earnestly. "I'm Ochako Uraraka." Izuku regarded her briefly. "Izuku Midoriya," he replied with a nod before turning to leave. As he walked away, he heard Uraraka ask the other student, "Is that really him? The Soul Emperor?" The whispered response followed him. "Yeah, that's him. They say he can take your soul if you show fear." Izuku allowed a small, satisfied curve of his lips. Fear had its uses, especially when it came from those who might become villains. For the innocent like Uraraka, he represented protection. For the guilty, judgment. That balance defined the Soul Emperor's approach to heroism. The exam concluded with Izuku achieving the highest robot villain point total in his battle center. He departed UA grounds without engaging in the social conversations that erupted among other examinees. His performance spoke for itself. No discussion was necessary. As he walked home, Zeus resuming its position on his shoulder, Izuku reflected on the day's events. UA would almost certainly accept him based on combat performance alone. The question remained whether their traditional approach to heroics could accommodate his methods. Adaptation would be required, on whose part remained to be seen. 1 week later, the acceptance letter arrived. Inko watched nervously as Izuku opened it, releasing a holographic projection of All Might himself. "Young Midoriya." The symbol of peace boomed from the projection. "I am here as a recording to inform you of your exam results." All Might explained the scoring system, villain points for defeating robots plus rescue points awarded by judges for heroic actions. Izuku had scored highest in villain points and received substantial rescue points for saving Uraraka. "Your total score places you first among all examinees," All Might continued, his perpetual smile somehow strained. "UA High School welcomes you to the hero course. However," here the number one hero paused, his expression becoming serious. "I must address certain concerns regarding your methods. While effective, the approach you've become known for as the Soul Emperor operates in gray areas of heroic conduct. At UA, you will be expected to develop a more conventional heroic presence. Your power is remarkable, young man, but true heroism requires heart as well as strength." Izuku's expression remained neutral as All Might concluded the message with his signature phrase, "Go beyond. Plus ultra." The projection disappeared, leaving Izuku and his mother in silence. "What do you think?" Inko finally asked. Izuku closed the acceptance letter carefully. "All Might doesn't understand," he said simply. "Conventional heroism has limitations. Villains exploit those limitations daily." "But perhaps there's wisdom in what he says," Inko suggested gently. "Your methods are effective, Izuku, but they've also isolated you. Heroes inspire as well as protect." "Fear inspires differently than a smile," Izuku replied, "but it inspires nonetheless." He stood, indicating the conversation was over. As he moved to his room, Zeus trailing behind him, Izuku considered All Might's words. The symbol of peace represented an ideal, the smiling hero who saves with overwhelming positivity. Izuku represented something else, the inevitable consequence for those who chose villainy. Both had their place in society. Whether UA accepted that reality would determine how smoothly his time there would proceed. The first day at UA High School arrived with considerable anticipation. Izuku departed early, his uniform immaculate, Zeus condensed to an inconspicuous size on his shoulder. Prometheus and Napoleon remained dormant but ready if needed, though he doubted they would be necessary on school grounds. As he approached the imposing gates, he noticed other students giving him a wide berth, conversations dropping to whispers as he passed. His reputation had clearly preceded him. Good. Fear established boundaries that prevented unnecessary confrontations. Classroom 1A would be his homeroom. Izuku entered to find several students already present, including Tenya Ida, who immediately approached with rigid movements. "Midoriya, good morning. I am pleased to see we will be classmates." Ida's formal delivery contrasted with the wariness in his eyes. "Ida?" Izuku acknowledged with a nod, before proceeding to an empty desk near the window. He preferred corner positions that allowed full visibility of the room. More students filtered in, their reactions to his presence varying. Some, like a girl with earphone jacks extending from her earlobes, tried to act nonchalant while maintaining distance. Others, including a red-haired boy with sharp teeth, approached with forced friendliness. "Hey, you're the Soul Emperor, right? That's so manly. I'm Eiichiro Kirishima." The red-haired boy extended his hand. Izuku regarded the offered hand momentarily before accepting it with a firm grip. "Izuku Midoriya." Kirishima winced slightly at the strength of Izuku's handshake, but maintained his smile. "Looking forward to training together, man." Before further conversation could develop, the classroom door slammed open as Katsuki Bakugo entered. His eyes immediately locked onto Izuku, narrowing with competitive intensity. "Midoriya," he growled, stalking toward his desk. "Don't think being first in the entrance exam means anything. I'm still going to be the #1 hero." Izuku met his gaze evenly. "Ambition is admirable, Bakugo. Capability is what matters." The tension between them was palpable, causing other students to edge away. Bakugo opened his mouth to retort when the classroom door slid open again, revealing Ochako Uraraka, the girl Izuku had rescued during the exam. "Oh," she exclaimed upon seeing him. "Midoriya, I wanted to thank you properly for saving me during the exam." Before Izuku could respond, a tired voice spoke from the floor. "If you're here to socialize, you can leave." The students turned to find a man encased in a yellow sleeping bag lying at the front of the classroom. He unzipped the bag to reveal an unkempt appearance with long black hair, bloodshot eyes, and a capture weapon scarf around his neck. "It took you all 8 seconds to quiet down," the man said as he stood, discarding the sleeping bag. "Time is precious. Rational students would understand that." He introduced himself as Shota Aizawa, their homeroom teacher, before immediately instructing them to change into gym clothes and meet at the training grounds. The abrupt beginning caught most students off guard, but Izuku simply complied, retrieving his gym uniform and heading to the changing room. As they assembled at the training field, Aizawa explained that they would be conducting a quirk assessment test. When Uraraka questioned the absence of an orientation ceremony, Aizawa dismissed such formalities as wasteful. "UA is known for its freestyle educational system," he explained flatly. "That applies to teachers as well." He turned his attention to Izuku. "Midoriya, you finished first in the practical exam. What was your softball throw distance in middle school?" 76 meters, Izuku replied. Aizawa tossed him a softball. "Try it with your quirk," Do whatever you need to. Just don't leave the circle. Students murmured in anticipation as Izuku stepped into the marked circle. Zeus expanded slightly on his shoulder, sensing the coming action. Izuku considered his options. He could throw conventionally with his enhanced strength, or he could employ his homies for additional force. He opted for the direct approach. Without elaborate wind-up, Izuku hurled the ball with precise control of his immense strength. The softball disappeared from view, creating a small sonic boom as it departed. Aizawa held up a measuring device, 1,243 meters. Gasps and exclamations erupted from the other students. Holy crap! That's insane! Is that really just a strength quirk? Aizawa silenced them with a glare before addressing the class. This is the most rational way to form the foundation of a hero, knowing your limits. His gaze lingered on Izuku, or in some cases, learning to establish them. The assessment continued through 8 physical tests, each designed to measure different applications of quirks. Izuku dominated each event without apparent effort. In the 50-meter dash, he crossed the finish line before the measuring equipment could properly register, requiring a review of slow-motion footage to confirm his time of 1.117 seconds. During the grip strength test, he crushed the measuring device entirely, necessitating a specially reinforced replacement that registered at the maximum limit of 999 kilograms. For the standing long jump, he cleared the entire sandbox and landed several meters beyond its boundaries, prompting Aizawa to dryly note the need for a larger testing area. Throughout the assessments, Izuku maintained his characteristic stoicism, neither celebrating his results nor acknowledging the increasingly odd reactions of his classmates. Only Bakugo seemed immune to the display, his determination visibly hardening with each demonstration of Izuku's superiority. After the final test, Aizawa gathered the students to display their rankings. Izuku's name appeared at the top with a perfect score across all events. At the bottom stood a short student with purple spheres for hair, Minoru Mineta, who now trembled as Aizawa reminded them that the lowest scoring student would be expelled. Just kidding, Aizawa announced after letting the tension build. That was a rational deception to draw out your maximum performance. Relief washed over most students, though Izuku had never doubted the outcome. As they were dismissed to change and return to the classroom, several students approached him with questions and congratulations. "Dude, that was amazing," Kirishima exclaimed. "Your quirk must be super versatile." "What's that cloud thing?" asked a girl with pink skin and horns. "Is it part of your quirk or like a pet or something?" "Is it true you can people's souls?" This came from a boy with a tail, his voice hushed and nervous. Izuku regarded them all impassively. "My quirk is soul manipulation," he stated simply. "Zeus is a manifestation of that power." The explanation was technically accurate, if incomplete. As the crowd of curious classmates grew, Aizawa intervened. "Enough socializing. Get changed and return to class." The students dispersed, though many continued to cast glances at Izuku as they walked away. Only one remained, a tall student with heterochromatic eyes and dual-colored hair who studied Izuku with calculated interest. "Midoriya," the boy said. "I'm Shoto Todoroki. Your control is impressive." Izuku met his gaze directly. "As is yours, Todoroki. You restrained yourself during the tests." A flicker of surprise crossed Todoroki's otherwise stoic features before he nodded once and walked away. Izuku had recognized a kindred spirit of sorts, someone else who understood power and its application. The difference, he suspected, lay in their willingness to use it. As the day progressed through introductory classes, Izuku maintained his detachment. He absorbed information efficiently, participated when called upon, and otherwise observed his classmates with analytical precision. Their quirks, personalities, and potential all factored into his assessment of the class dynamics. At day's end, as students gathered their belongings and formed conversational groups, Izuku prepared to leave alone. He was surprised when Aizawa called him to remain behind. Once the classroom had emptied, Aizawa fixed him with a direct stare. "Your reputation precedes you, Soul Emperor." Izuku didn't respond, waiting for the teacher to continue. "Your methods in the field have been effective but controversial," Aizawa continued. "Soul extraction isn't a recognized hero technique, nor is it approved by any regulatory body." "Results speak for themselves," Izuku replied evenly. "Results aren't everything in heroism," Aizawa countered. The path matters as much as the destination. At UA, you'll learn proper hero protocols and ethical applications of your quirk. And if those protocols limit effectiveness, Izuku challenged. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. Then you adapt. That's what rational heroes do. He paused, his expression softening slightly. Your power is exceptional, Midoriya, but power without restraint isn't heroism, it's tyranny, even if it's used against villains. The statement hung between them, neither confirmation nor condemnation. Izuku considered his teacher's words carefully before responding. I'll consider your perspective, Aizawa-sensei. The teacher nodded, apparently satisfied with this minimal concession. That's all I ask? For now? He gestured toward the door. You're dismissed. As Izuku departed UA grounds, Zeus resuming its position on his shoulder, he reflected on Aizawa's words. The teacher wasn't wrong about perception. The Soul Emperor's methods existed in a gray area that made many uncomfortable, but effectiveness remained Izuku's primary concern. Villains didn't hesitate to use their full capabilities. Heroes who did placed themselves at a disadvantage. Still, adaptation had its place. To operate within the established hero system would require certain compromises, at least until he attained the position and influence to change that system from within. The path to becoming the greatest hero would require navigating more than just villain confrontations. It would mean reshaping society's understanding of what heroism could be, and for that, Izuku Midoriya would need more than raw power. He would need legitimacy. That evening, as he trained in his private facility with his homies, Izuku made a decision. He would adapt as necessary at UA, learn what was useful from their curriculum, and build the connections that would serve his larger purpose. The Soul Emperor would continue his work, perhaps with more subtlety, but no less determination. The hero world wasn't ready for him. That would change, one soul at a time. The following weeks, at UA, established a rhythm. Classroom instruction alternated with practical training, each designed to develop different aspects of heroic capability. Izuku participated fully while maintaining his characteristic detachment from the social dynamics that consumed many of his classmates. All Might's heroics class proved particularly interesting. The symbol of peace brought an infectious energy to his teaching, despite his obvious discomfort when interacting with Izuku directly. Their first practical exercise, a heroes versus villains simulation, highlighted this tension perfectly. Young heroes. All Might boomed, resplendent in his Silver Age costume. Today, you'll experience indoor battle training. Villain cleanup is usually seen outdoors, but statistically, the most heinous villains are more likely to appear indoors. He explained the scenario. Teams of 2 would be designated as either heroes or villains, with the heroes attempting to secure a mock weapon or capture the villains, while the villains defended until time expired. Teams will be determined by drawing lots. All Might announced, producing a box containing numbered balls. Fate paired Izuku with Ochako Uraraka, whose nervous smile suggested both excitement and apprehension at working with the infamous Soul Emperor. Their opponents would be Katsuki Bakugo and Tenya Ida, playing the villain role. Midoriya? Uraraka approached hesitantly as they prepared. I'm really happy to be working with you, but I'm not sure how our quirks can complement each other. Izuku studied her briefly. Your zero gravity allows for environmental manipulation and mobility enhancement. It's versatile. He gestured to Zeus, who hovered near his shoulder. Zeus can provide aerial transport if needed. Your role will be to secure the weapon while I engage Bakugo and Ida. Uraraka blinked at the direct assessment. You want to take them both on alone? It's the most efficient approach, Izuku replied matter-of-factly. Bakugo will target me regardless. His pride demands it. As they entered the building where the exercise would take place, Izuku outlined a simple strategy. They would advance together initially, then separate once they located the weapon. Uraraka listened attentively, her initial nervousness giving way to determination. I won't let you down, she promised. Izuku nodded acknowledgement. Stay behind me until we engage. They proceeded cautiously through the concrete corridors of the mock building. Zeus had condensed to minimal size, maintaining a low profile beside Izuku. They encountered no resistance on the first floor, suggesting the villains had opted for a defensive position around the weapon. Second or third floor, Izuku mused. Bakugo is impulsive, but Ida thinks strategically. As if summoned by the assessment, an explosion erupted from around the corner ahead. Bakugo emerged from the smoke, his expression fierce with competitive fire. "Finally!" he snarled, ignition gauntlets raised. "Time to put you in your place, Midoriya." Izuku stepped forward, positioning himself between Bakugo and Uraraka. "Proceed to the upper floors," he instructed her without turning. "Find the weapon." "But," Uraraka began to protest. "Go," Izuku repeated firmly. This confrontation was inevitable. As Uraraka reluctantly moved toward the stairwell, Bakugo launched himself forward with an explosion-propelled right hook, his favored opening move since childhood. Izuku didn't dodge. He simply stood his ground, allowing the blow to connect with his chest. Bakugo's fist impacted the iron balloon defense and stopped cold. The explosion that accompanied it washed over Izuku without effect, leaving only slightly singed clothing in its wake. Still relying on the same attack pattern, Izuku observed calmly. Predictable. Fury contorted Bakugo's features. "Don't look down on me," he roared, unleashing a barrage of explosions directly into Izuku's face. The assault continued for several seconds, filling the corridor with smoke and debris. When it cleared, Izuku remained unmoved, his expression unchanged save for a slight narrowing of his eyes. "Are you finished?" he asked. Bakugo stepped back, momentary uncertainty flickering across his features before determination reasserted itself. "I'm just getting started," he growled, adjusting his gauntlets. "I've been saving this move for you." He aimed his right gauntlet at Izuku, pulling a pin that would release a concentrated explosion far beyond his normal output. "Die!" he screamed as the massive blast erupted from his palm. The explosion tore through the corridor, the force sufficient to collapse support pillars and buckle reinforced walls. All Might's voice crackled over the communication system. "Young Bakugo, such a large-scale attack indoors is..." His reprimand cut short as the smoke cleared, revealing Izuku still standing. Zeus now expanded to form a protective barrier around him. Parts of his uniform had been destroyed, revealing undamaged skin beneath. "An attack that powerful has tactical value," Izuku commented, brushing debris from his shoulders. "But your aim needs improvement." Before Bakugo could respond, Izuku moved, covering the distance between them with startling speed. His hand shot out, gripping Bakugo's wrist with immovable force. "Life or..." Izuku began automatically, then stopped himself, remembering the context. This was a training exercise, not a villain confrontation. "This ends now." With precise control, he twisted Bakugo's arm behind his back and forced him to his knees, applying just enough pressure to restrain without causing injury. With his free hand, he retrieved the capture tape provided for the exercise and bound Bakugo's wrists. "Villain captured," Izuku reported into his communicator. Bakugo struggled against the restraints, his rage palpable. "This isn't over, Midoriya. You hear me? This isn't." "It was over before it began," Izuku interrupted. "Your quirk is powerful, Bakugo, but you lack strategy and control. Power without direction is just noise." He left Bakugo secured in the corridor and proceeded toward the upper floors, where Uraraka would be confronting Ida. Through his earpiece, he heard the sounds of their engagement. Ida's formal villain monologue, Uraraka's determined responses, the clash of their quirks in the weapon room. Izuku arrived to find Uraraka floating near the ceiling, trying to maneuver around Ida's high-speed patrols of the weapon area. The engine-legged student performed his villain role with theatrical enthusiasm, complete with exaggerated mannerisms. "Reinforcements have arrived, Uraraka," Izuku announced, stepping into the room. "Bakugo has been neutralized." Ida's head snapped toward him, genuine alarm replacing his performative villainy. "Already? But..." His moment of distraction was all Uraraka needed. She released her quirk, dropping directly toward the weapon. Ida recovered quickly, his engines flaring as he moved to intercept, but Zeus surged forward at Izuku's silent command, blocking Ida's path with an electrical barrier. Uraraka landed on the weapon, wrapping her arms around it. "Weapon secured," she announced triumphantly. "Hero team wins." All Might's voice declared through the building's speaker system. In the review session that followed, All Might praised their teamwork, while gently suggesting that Izuku could have employed less overwhelming force against Bakugo. Bakugo himself sat in seething silence, his hands clenched into fists so tight his knuckles whitened. "Young Midoriya," All Might concluded, "your performance was undeniably effective, but remember that restraint is also a heroic virtue. Not every situation calls for maximum force. Izuku accepted the critique with a neutral expression. I adjusted my approach appropriately for the exercise. In a real combat situation, different parameters would apply. The implied reference to his Soul Emperor methods caused a ripple of unease through the classroom. All Might's perpetual smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Indeed, the symbol of peace acknowledged. Which is why these exercises are so important. They help us understand the difference between field operations and heroic ideals. The subtle rebuke did not go unnoticed, but Izuku chose not to respond further. The gap between All Might's perspective and his own remained significant, but this was neither the time nor place to address it. As the class concluded, Uraraka approached him with an enthusiastic smile. "We made a great team, Midoriya. Your quirk is amazing. I've never seen anything like it." "Your performance was competent," Izuku replied, the closest he came to offering praise. "Your quirk has considerable potential if applied strategically." Uraraka's smile faltered slightly at his clinical assessment before brightening again. "Thanks. I'm still working on creative applications. Maybe we could train together sometime?" Before Izuku could respond, Kirishima joined them, slapping him on the back with friendly force. "Man, you completely dominated out there. That's the Soul Emperor we've heard about." Others gathered around. Kaminari with his electric quirk, Ashido with her acid abilities, Sero with his tape, all eager to discuss the exercise and Izuku's performance. He answered their questions directly but briefly, unused to this kind of social interaction. As the crowd around him grew, Izuku noticed Bakugo stalking from the room, his posture rigid with suppressed rage. Their confrontation had deepened something in the explosive boy, a determination that bordered on obsession. It would need to be addressed eventually, but not today. For now, Izuku allowed the conversation to continue, studying his classmates with analytical interest. These were the future heroes of Japan, his future colleagues or competitors depending on how their paths developed. Understanding their capabilities and personalities would be tactically advantageous. And perhaps, though he would not readily admit it, there was value in these connections beyond the strategic. The Soul Emperor had always operated alone, with only his homies for company. These interactions, however uncomfortable, represented something new, the possibility of allies who understood his methods and goals. Whether such allies would emerge from this group remained to be seen. But Izuku Midoriya, ever the strategist, would not dismiss the possibility prematurely. The USJ incident changed everything. What should have been a routine rescue training exercise at the Unforeseen Simulation Joint Facility became a crucible that tested Class 1A's preparedness and resolve. When the black mist of Kurogiri's warp gate appeared in the central plaza, disgorging dozens of villains led by the hand-covered Tamura Shigaraki, most students froze in shock and fear. Izuku Midoriya did not. As 13 and Aizawa attempted to organize an evacuation, Izuku assessed the situation with cold precision. Aizawa would engage the main force to buy time. 13 would guard the exit. The students would be scattered and vulnerable. Unacceptable. "Everyone behind me," Izuku commanded, his voice cutting through the panic. Zeus expanded beside him, electricity crackling across its cloudy surface. 13, focus on evacuation. Aizawa-sensei will need support against those numbers. Aizawa turned sharply. "Midoriya, this isn't a training exercise. Stay back and protect your classmates." "With respect, Sensei," Izuku replied, "tactical reality takes precedence over protocol. They came prepared to kill All Might. They won't hesitate with students." Before Aizawa could respond, Kurogiri's mist expanded toward them. "Greetings, UA students," the villain's disembodied voice echoed. "We are the League of Villains, gathered to ensure the symbol of peace draws his last breath." Izuku didn't wait for the monologue to finish. Zeus surged forward, discharging a concentrated bolt of lightning directly into the mist villain's visible metal neck brace. The electrical current caused Kurogiri to contract involuntarily, his warp gate fluctuating. "Now!" Izuku shouted to 13. "Evacuate while his quirk is disrupted." The space hero hesitated only momentarily before activating Black Hole, creating a suction path toward the exit. "Everyone move. Follow my lead." Most students rushed toward the exit, but Kurogiri recovered quickly, his mist expanding throughout the facility. Portals opened beneath students' feet, separating them into smaller groups and depositing them in different simulation zones. Izuku found himself transported to the landslide zone alongside Todoroki and Bakugo. 5 villains surrounded them, quirks activated and ready for combat. Well, one villain sneered, his body covered in stone-like protrusions. Just some kids after all, this'll be easy. Bakugo's palms crackled with explosive potential. Don't underestimate me, extras. Todoroki remained silent, frost forming around his right side. Izuku stepped forward, Zeus hovering ominously behind him. The villains faltered slightly at the sight of the living thundercloud. Life or death? Izuku asked calmly. The stone villain laughed nervously. What kind of question is that, kid? We're here to kill you, so death it is, Izuku concluded. What followed was not a battle, but a systematic dismantling. Zeus expanded dramatically, engulfing 2 villains in electrical discharge that left them unconscious instantly. Izuku himself moved with frightening speed, delivering precisely calculated strikes that incapacitated without killing. One villain attempted to flee, only to find Napoleon, summoned silently by Izuku, blocking his path. The sword homie extended, its edge glinting in the artificial light of the facility. Master, Napoleon acknowledged, awaiting instructions. Disable him, Izuku ordered, non-lethal. Napoleon swept forward, the flat of its blade striking the villain's legs with enough force to fracture but not sever. The man collapsed with a scream of pain that quickly subsided as Izuku delivered a knockout blow. Todoroki and Bakugo stood in stunned silence, having barely engaged before the threat was neutralized. 5 villains lay unconscious around them, defeated in less than 30 seconds. We need to return to the central plaza, Izuku stated, already moving. That's where their leader will be. Bakugo bristled at the commanding tone but followed, competitive instinct overriding his usual antagonism. Don't order me around, Midoriya! Todoroki moved alongside them, his heterochromatic gaze assessing Izuku with new interest. Your homies, he said quietly. They're not just manifestations of your quirk, are they? Izuku glanced at him but didn't slow his pace. They're extensions of my will, he replied, neither confirming nor denying Todoroki's implied question. As they approached the central plaza, the situation came into view. Aizawa was engaged with multiple villains, his capture weapon and erasure quirk keeping him mobile but clearly overstretched. Nearby, a massive, bird-headed creature with exposed brain tissue stood motionless beside Shigaraki, awaiting orders. The black monster, Izuku observed, engineered for strength and durability, likely a match for All Might. You can tell that just by looking, Bakugo demanded skeptically. It's obvious in its construction, Izuku replied. We need to extract Aizawa-sensei before it engages. Todoroki nodded. I'll create a diversion. Without waiting for agreement, he planted his right foot, sending a massive wave of ice across the plaza floor toward the villain group. The distraction worked, momentarily. Shigaraki turned toward them, his hand-covered face tilting with curious malice. Oh? Some students escaped Kurogiri's warp? How annoying. Aizawa attempted to use the opportunity to retreat, but his exhaustion had slowed his reactions. Before he could reach safety, the bird-headed creature, Nomu, as Shigaraki called it, moved with impossible speed, gripping Aizawa's arm and slamming him into the ground with bone-shattering force. Sensei! Bakugo shouted, launching forward with explosive propulsion. Wait! Izuku called, but Bakugo was already committed to his attack. The explosive blast struck Nomu directly and did absolutely nothing. The creature didn't flinch, didn't acknowledge the attack in any way. It simply continued to hold Aizawa down, breaking his other arm with methodical cruelty. Nomu is designed to take All Might's punches, Shigaraki explained with childlike glee. Your firecrackers won't even tickle him. Bakugo landed several meters away, momentary shock visible on his features before rage reasserted itself. We'll see about that, he snarled, preparing another attack. Before he could launch it, Izuku stepped forward. Bakugo Todoroki, extract Aizawa-sensei. I'll handle Nomu. Handle it? Shigaraki laughed, scratching his neck with disturbing intensity. You're just an NPC in this game, kid. Nomu is the raid boss. Izuku ignored him, focusing on the artificial human that still pinned Aizawa. Zeus expanded to combat size behind him while Prometheus materialized alongside it, the Sun Homie's heat causing the air to shimmer. Napoleon, Izuku called, and the sword homie appeared in his hand, extending to its full length. Shigaraki's scratching intensified. What is this? A quirk that creates weapons? Interesting, but useless against Nomu's shock absorption and regeneration. We'll see, Izuku replied simply. Then he moved. His speed shocked even Bakugo and Todoroki, who had witnessed his capabilities before. One moment, Izuku stood beside them. The next, he was directly in front of Nomu, Napoleon slashing in a perfect arc that severed the creature's arm at the shoulder. The limb that had been holding Aizawa fell away, allowing Todoroki to create an ice slide that pulled their teacher to safety. Nomu didn't react to the loss of its arm. It simply turned toward Izuku with mindless obedience. Impossible! Shigaraki shrieked. Nomu's skin is reinforced to withstand All Might's punches. No blade should cut it. Izuku stepped back as Nomu's severed limb began to regenerate, new muscle and bone forming before their eyes. Regeneration confirmed, he noted clinically. Zeus, test electrical vulnerability. The thundercloud surged forward, engulfing Nomu in a massive electrical discharge that would have killed a normal human instantly. The creature shuddered but remained standing, its regeneration accelerating to repair electrical burns as they formed. I told you, Shigaraki laughed manically. Nomu was built to kill All Might. A student can't possibly. His words cut short as Izuku extended his hand toward Nomu, fingers splayed in a now familiar gesture. Life or death? For the first time, uncertainty crept into Shigaraki's voice. What are you doing? Izuku's power activated. The air between him and Nomu distorted as he attempted to extract the creature's soul. But something unexpected happened. There was resistance. A strange emptiness where a soul should be. Artificial human, Izuku realized aloud. Limited soul presence. Interesting. He adjusted his approach, focusing more intently. The extraction was difficult, like pulling thread through concrete, but gradually a small, malformed soul fragment separated from Nomu's body. The creature shuddered, its movements becoming erratic. What's happening to it? Shigaraki demanded, genuine alarm in his voice. What are you doing to Nomu? The soul fragment finally pulled free, smaller and less substantial than a normal human's, but still usable. Nomu collapsed to its knees, its regeneration slowing dramatically. Your weapon has a fundamental weakness, Izuku informed Shigaraki as he examined the extracted soul. It was created without considering all possible counters. Fury and fear warred in Shigaraki's body language. Who are you? He hissed. The Soul Emperor, Izuku replied, directing the extracted fragment toward Napoleon. The sword Homie absorbed it, its blade edge taking on a jagged, organic quality that mimicked Nomu's musculature. With Nomu temporarily weakened and Aizawa secured, the balance of power had shifted. Shigaraki seemed to realize this, stepping back toward Kurogiri, who had recovered and returned to the central plaza. This wasn't in the plan, Shigaraki muttered, scratching his neck frantically. A kid who can extract souls? No one said anything about a final boss hiding among the NPCs. Before he could retreat, the facility doors burst open with tremendous force. All Might arrived in his hero costume, his signature smile nowhere to be seen as he surveyed the scene. Have no fear, the symbol of peace announced, though his voice carried an edge rarely heard. For I am here. All Might's arrival changed the calculation completely. Shigaraki hesitated, looking between the number one hero and Izuku, who still stood over the kneeling Nomu. Game over, Shigaraki finally decided. Kurogiri, we're leaving. This side quest failed. The mist villain expanded, creating a warp gate behind them. The Nomu, he began. Leave it, Shigaraki interrupted. It's broken now. We'll make more. As they disappeared into the portal, All Might rushed forward, attempting to intercept, but arrived moments too late. The villains had escaped, leaving only their artificial human behind. All Might turned to Izuku, taking in the scene. Nomu on its knees, the homies hovering nearby, Napoleon glowing with absorbed power. His expression showed a complex mixture of relief, concern, and unease. Young Midoriya, he said carefully, you confronted the villains directly. It wasn't quite an accusation, but the implication was clear. Izuku met his gaze steadily. I neutralized an immediate threat when no other option existed, he replied. Aizawa-sensei would have been killed otherwise. All Might couldn't argue with the results, though his discomfort with the methods remained evident. His attention shifted to Nomu, which remained in its degraded state. What did you do to this creature? He asked. Soul extraction, Izuku explained simply. It appears to have a minimal soul presence, but enough to maintain its higher functions. Removing a portion has significantly impaired its capabilities. The implications of this information clearly troubled All Might, but before he could respond further, police and additional hero reinforcements arrived. The situation devolved into controlled chaos as statements were taken, injuries treated, and security established. In the aftermath, as students were gathered for transport back to campus, Izuku found himself the center of attention. His classmates approached with new respect and, in some cases, newfound wariness. "You saved Aizawa-sensei," Kirishima said, his voice subdued but sincere. "That was really manly, Midoriya." Uraraka nodded emphatically. "You weren't afraid at all, even when that monster appeared." "The Soul Emperor doesn't fear villains," Bakugo interjected unexpectedly. His usual hostility was tempered with grudging acknowledgement. "Villains fear him." The statement hung in the air, neither praise nor criticism, but simply fact. They're created from extracted souls, correct? Not manifested constructs as your records suggest. It wasn't really a question. Izuku nodded once, confirming what they had already deduced. Young Midoriya, All Might, interjected, his voice gentler than his colleagues. "The ethical implications of soul manipulation are complex. Taking even a portion of someone's soul raises serious questions about autonomy and consent." "I offer a choice," Izuku countered. "Life or death, those who choose poorly suffer the consequences." "Fear-induced consent isn't genuine consent," Aizawa pointed out sharply, "and the long-term effects of partial soul removal haven't been studied. You're essentially employing an unregulated, potentially damaging technique." Izuku met his teacher's gaze directly. "The technique is effective. The villains I've confronted were attempting murder, kidnapping, or worse. Their comfort was not my priority." A heavy silence followed this statement. Nezu sipped his tea thoughtfully before setting the cup down with a decisive click. "Here is our situation, Midoriya," the principal said. "You possess extraordinary power that has proven valuable against significant threats. However, your methods exist in a legal gray area that creates complications for both you and UA." Nezu folded his paws on the desk. "We propose the following. You will continue your education at UA with certain conditions. First, your quirk registration will be updated to accurately reflect your abilities. Second, you will participate in special ethics training with All Might to develop alternative applications of your power. Third, you will refrain from unsanctioned soul extraction during school activities unless absolutely necessary to preserve life." "And outside school activities?" Izuku asked, the implication clear. "Officially, we cannot condone independent vigilante actions," Nezu replied carefully. "Unofficially, we recognize that your past interventions have saved lives. We ask only that you exercise greater discretion and reserve your more extreme measures for truly dangerous villains." The compromise was pragmatic, neither full endorsement nor rejection of the Soul Emperor's methods. It acknowledged reality while attempting to guide Izuku toward more conventional heroism. Acceptable? Izuku agreed after brief consideration. The arrangement would allow him to continue both his education and his mission with minimal interference. "There's one more thing," All Might added, his expression unusually serious. "The villains now know about you, young Midoriya. Your abilities make you a target, possibly even more so than me. The League will adapt their approach, possibly develop countermeasures." "Let them try," Izuku replied, his confidence absolute. All Might shook his head slightly. "This isn't about your capability, young man. It's about responsibility. Your actions affect others, your classmates, your family, innocent bystanders. True heroism requires considering those consequences." The words struck closer to home than Izuku would admit. His mother's worried face flashed in his mind, the gray hairs and stress lines that had multiplied with each passing year of his activities. "I understand," he acknowledged, the smallest hint of emotion breaking through his usual stoicism. "I will be more considerate in my approach." This concession, small as it was, seemed to satisfy All Might, whose signature smile returned with genuine warmth. "That's all we ask, young Midoriya. Growth, development, The journey to becoming a true hero is as important as the destination." As the meeting concluded, Nezu added one final stipulation. "The sports festival is approaching. It's an opportunity to showcase UA's finest students to hero agencies and the public. I trust you'll participate with appropriate restraint?" Izuku nodded. "I'll adapt to the parameters of the competition." The annual UA Sports Festival would indeed require adaptation. Izuku accepted it with a slight nod, aware that something had shifted in their dynamic. Not friendship, exactly, but a different kind of recognition. As they boarded the buses back to UA, Todoroki fell into step beside him. "Those homies of yours," he said quietly. "They're made from villain souls, aren't they? That's your actual quirk." Izuku glanced at him, measuring his response. "Does that disturb you?" Todoroki considered this, heterochromatic eyes revealing nothing. "It's efficient," he finally replied. "Villains create their own punishment. There's a certain justice in that." The conversation ended there, but an understanding had formed. An acknowledgement between two students with perspectives that diverged from conventional heroism. Whether this would develop into alliance or rivalry remained to be seen. As the bus pulled away from the USJ facility, Izuku looked back at the building where he had revealed more of his capabilities than originally intended. The Soul Emperor's methods were now more visible to both allies and enemies. Adjustments would be necessary. The League of Villains had targeted UA specifically, seeking to kill All Might. Their failure today wouldn't deter them. It would only drive them to develop new strategies, possibly ones that accounted for Izuku's abilities. Good. Let them try. Let them fear. The Soul Emperor would be waiting, and next time, he wouldn't be as merciful. The USJ incident accelerated everything. What might have been a gradual revelation of Izuku's methods became public knowledge overnight. News reports spoke of the UA student who defeated a Nomu, careful not to use the vigilante name Soul Emperor directly, but making the connection obvious through careful phrasing and strategic blurring of footage that showed his homies in action. UA. Its administration responded with a carefully coordinated press conference. Principal Nezu, flanked by Aizawa heavily bandaged but present and All Might, addressed the media's questions about security failures and, inevitably, about Izuku. All students acted appropriately under extreme circumstances, Nezu stated diplomatically. While we do not encourage first-year students to engage villains directly, the situation at USJ was unprecedented. Their actions potentially saved lives. When pressed specifically about unusual quirk applications witnessed during the incident, All Might stepped forward. Young Midoriya possesses a powerful and versatile quirk, the symbol of peace explained, his signature smile firmly in place despite the tension evident in his posture. Like all our students, he is learning to apply his abilities within proper heroic parameters. UA exists precisely to guide young people with exceptional gifts toward responsible use of their powers. The carefully worded statement satisfied neither Izuku's critics nor his supporters, but it bought time. Time for UA to determine how to proceed with a student whose methods blurred the lines between heroism and vigilantism. That determination came in the form of a private meeting with Principal Nezu, All Might, and Aizawa 3 days after the incident. Izuku sat across from them in Nezu's office, Zeus condensed to shoulder size beside him. "Midoriya," Nezu began, his perpetually pleasant expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. "Your actions at USJ demonstrated exceptional combat capability and tactical thinking. However, they also raised concerns about your approach to heroism." Izuku remained silent, waiting for the principal to continue. "Soul extraction," Nezu stated directly. "It's not registered as part of your quirk in official documentation. Why is that?" "Most quirk registration occurs at age 4, Izuku replied evenly. "The full extent of my abilities wasn't immediately apparent." Aizawa leaned forward, his injured state doing nothing to diminish his intensity. "And these homies, Zeus, Prometheus, Napoleon, they're created from extracted souls, correct? Not manifested constructs as your records suggest." It wasn't really a question. Izuku nodded once, confirming what they had already deduced. "Young Midoriya," All Might interjected, his voice gentler than his colleagues. "The ethical implications of soul manipulation are complex. Taking even a portion of someone's soul raises serious questions about autonomy and consent." "I offer a choice," Izuku countered. "Life or death. Those who choose poorly suffer the consequences." "Fear-induced consent isn't genuine consent," Aizawa pointed out sharply, "and the long-term effects of partial soul removal haven't been studied. You're essentially employing an unregulated, potentially damaging technique." Izuku met his teacher's gaze directly. The technique is effective. The villains I've confronted were attempting murder, kidnapping, or worse. Their comfort was not my priority. A heavy silence followed this statement. Nezu sipped his tea thoughtfully before setting the cup down with a decisive click. "Here is our situation, Midoriya," the principal said. "You possess extraordinary power that has proven valuable against significant threats. However, your methods exist in a legal gray area that creates complications for both you and UA." Nezu folded his paws on the desk. "We propose the following. You will continue your education at UA with certain conditions. First, your quirk registration will be updated to accurately reflect your abilities. Second, you will participate in special ethics training with All Might to develop alternative applications of your power. Third, you will refrain from unsanctioned soul extraction during school activities unless absolutely necessary to preserve life." "And outside school activities?" Izuku asked, the implication clear. "Officially, we cannot condone independent vigilante actions," Nezu replied carefully. "Unofficially, we recognize that your past interventions have saved lives. We ask only that you exercise greater discretion and reserve your more extreme measures for truly dangerous villains." The compromise was pragmatic, neither full endorsement nor rejection of the Soul Emperor's methods. It acknowledged reality while attempting to guide Izuku toward more conventional heroism. "Acceptable," Izuku agreed after brief consideration. The arrangement would allow him to continue both his education and his mission with minimal interference. "There's one more thing," All Might added, his expression unusually serious. "The villains now know about you, young Midoriya. Your abilities make you a target, possibly even more so than me. The League will adapt their approach, possibly develop countermeasures." "Let them try," Izuku replied, his confidence absolute. All Might shook his head slightly. "This isn't about your capability, young man. It's about responsibility. Your actions affect others, your classmates, your family, innocent bystanders. True heroism requires considering those consequences." The words struck closer to home than Izuku would admit. His mother's worried face flashed in his mind. The gray hairs and stress lines that had multiplied with each passing year of his activities. "I understand," he acknowledged, the smallest hint of emotion breaking through his usual stoicism. "I will be more considerate in my approach." This concession, small as it was, seemed to satisfy All Might, whose signature smile returned with genuine warmth. "That's all we ask, young Midoriya. Growth, development. The journey to becoming a true hero is as important as the destination." As the meeting concluded, Nezu added one final stipulation. "The sports festival is approaching. It's an opportunity to showcase UA's finest students to hero agencies and the public. I trust you'll participate with appropriate restraint?" Izuku nodded. "I'll adapt to the parameters of the competition." The annual UA Sports Festival would indeed require adaptation. Unlike villain confrontations, it involved competition against peers, fellow heroes in training who deserved respect rather than the fear tactics he employed against criminals. It would be a different kind of challenge, one that tested not just his power, but his control. As he left the principal's office, Izuku found Todoroki waiting in the hallway, leaning against the wall with deliberate casualness that didn't match the intensity of his gaze. "Midoriya," he acknowledged. "Did they try to restrict your methods?" "A compromise was reached," Izuku replied neutrally. Todoroki nodded, seemingly unsurprised. "The sports festival is coming. Everyone will be watching." He straightened, fixing Izuku with a direct stare. "I intend to beat you without using my left side. Consider it a declaration of war." The challenge was unexpected, but not unwelcome. Todoroki possessed perhaps the most raw potential in their class, his half-hot, half-cold quirk offering versatility that rivaled Izuku's own power in different ways. "Interesting," Izuku responded, "though handicapping yourself seems counterproductive." "It's my choice," Todoroki stated firmly. "Just as your methods are yours, we each have our reasons." With that cryptic statement, he walked away, leaving Izuku to consider this new dynamic. A rivalry based not on jealousy or antagonism like Bakugo's, but on principle and personal philosophy. It held potential for mutual growth. The sports festival would indeed be illuminating, not just for the watching agencies and public, but for Class 1A itself. Lines were being drawn, alliances forming, rivalries establishing, And at the center of many of these developing relationships stood Izuku Midoriya, the Soul Emperor, whose presence had catalyzed changes throughout UA. Whether those changes would strengthen or fracture the hero community remained to be seen. But one thing was certain: nothing would be the same after the festival. For better or worse, the world would witness what the Soul Emperor could do when the spotlight shone directly upon him. And Izuku would show them a controlled version of his power, impressive enough to establish his dominance, but restrained enough to avoid alienating potential allies. It was a delicate balance, but one he was determined to master. The path to becoming the greatest hero required not just strength, but strategy. The sports festival would be his first move on a larger board. The UA Sports Festival Stadium pulsed with energy as thousands of spectators filled the stands. Pro heroes, talent scouts, media personalities, and civilians alike had gathered to witness the next generation of heroes display their capabilities. For the students, it represented an unparalleled opportunity to gain recognition and secure valuable internship offers. For Izuku Midoriya, it was something else entirely. A tactical challenge that required a careful balance between demonstration of power and strategic restraint. As Class 1A gathered in the preparation room, the atmosphere crackled with competitive tension. Bakugo paced near the wall, palms occasionally sparking with controlled explosions. Todoroki sat alone in the corner, frost periodically forming and dissipating around his right hand. Others engaged in last-minute quirk exercises or quiet meditation. Kirishima approached Izuku, who stood silently near the door, Zeus condensed to an inconspicuous size on his shoulder. "Man, I'm pumped!" the red-haired boy exclaimed, his sharp teeth flashing in an excited grin. "Everyone's going all out today." "As they should," Izuku replied. "Hero agencies base internship offers on performance here." "Are you going all out too?" Kirishima asked, lowering his voice slightly. "Like full Soul Emperor mode?" The question drew attention from others nearby. Izuku considered his response carefully, aware of the impact his answer would have on class morale. "I'll participate appropriately," he stated. "My goal is the same as yours, to demonstrate capability." Before further discussion could develop, Ida burst through the door with characteristic formality. "Everyone, it's almost time to enter. Please form an orderly line." The classes assembled in the central arena, where Present Mike's voice boomed introductions that echoed throughout the stadium. Special emphasis fell on Class 1A, particularly the students who had faced real villains at the USJ facility. When Izuku's name was announced, a noticeable hush fell over the crowd, followed by intense murmuring as spectators pointed and leaned forward in their seats. And representing the first-year students, Katsuki Bakugo! Present Mike announced, as Bakugo took the stage for the student pledge. The explosive boy's speech was characteristically blunt. "I'm going to win." He stepped down amid a mixture of cheers and bewildered reactions from other classes. Midnight, serving as chief referee, announced the first event, an obstacle race around the stadium's perimeter. As the students lined up at the starting gate, Izuku positioned himself strategically toward the center, anticipating the initial bottleneck. "Begin," Midnight declared, and chaos erupted immediately. The narrow exit tunnel created exactly the congestion Izuku had predicted. Most students pushed and shoved, using their quirks in increasingly desperate attempts to advance. Todoroki moved first, creating an ice path that propelled him forward while freezing others in place. Izuku approached differently. Zeus expanded beneath him, lifting him above the crowd entirely. He soared over the bottleneck, passing even Todoroki to take an early lead. "Look at that, folks," Present Mike's commentary echoed. "Midoriya from Class 1A is using some kind of cloud manifestation to bypass the crowd entirely. Creative quirk application at its finest." The first real obstacle appeared, the Robo Inferno, featuring massive robots similar to those from the entrance exam. Todoroki froze several in place as he ran beneath them. Others employed various tactics, from direct confrontation to evasive maneuvering. Izuku didn't slow. Zeus carried him directly toward the largest robot, electricity building around the thundercloud's form. As they approached, Zeus discharged a concentrated lightning bolt that struck the robot's central processing unit, causing it to short-circuit and collapse. Midoriya takes the direct approach. Present Mike shouted enthusiastically. "One shot, one kill." The second obstacle, the fall, consisted of a series of platforms suspended over a deep canyon, connected by tight ropes. Again, Izuku's aerial advantage allowed him to bypass the challenge entirely, maintaining his lead, as others struggled with balance and competing students. The final obstacle, the minefield, presented a different challenge. The mines weren't lethal, but created powerful explosions that could throw competitors back significantly. Here, Izuku finally touched down, dismissing Zeus temporarily to comply with the spirit of the competition. He proceeded methodically, identifying mine positions through subtle ground discolorations and navigating between them with precise footwork. Behind him, Todoroki and Bakugo had nearly caught up, their determination driving them forward at increasing speed. The two rivals reached Izuku simultaneously, creating a three-way race across the minefield. Bakugo launched himself forward with controlled explosions, while Todoroki created ice paths that barely touched the ground. "I won't lose to either of you," Bakugo snarled, palms flashing with detonations. Todoroki remained silent, his focus absolute as he pushed his right side to its limit. Izuku evaluated the situation instantly. Victory here was tactically valuable, but not essential. What mattered was qualifying for the next round while demonstrating sufficient skill to attract attention. Dominating completely might satisfy his competitive instinct, but could alienate potential allies and draw unwanted scrutiny. He made his decision, adjusting his pace slightly to maintain position without accelerating to his full capability. The three leaders crossed the finish line in rapid succession. Bakugo first by inches, followed by Todoroki, then Izuku. What an incredible finish! Present Mick roared as the stadium erupted in cheers. Bakugo takes first place with Todoroki and Midoriya right on his heels. The Class 1A powerhouses show why they're considered this year's top contenders. Bakugo's victory celebration was typically aggressive, a roar of triumph with explosions bursting from his palms. Todoroki simply walked away, his expression unreadable. Izuku observed both reactions with analytical detachment. The outcome had served its purpose. Qualification secured, capability demonstrated, strategic restraint maintained. The second event was announced, a cavalry battle where teams would compete to capture headbands representing point values. Bakugo, as first-place finisher, had the 10 million point headband, making him everyone's primary target. Team formation began immediately. Izuku found himself approached by multiple classmates, each eager to ally with the Soul Emperor despite his third-place finish. "Midoriya," Uraraka called, approaching with determined enthusiasm. "Let's team up. Your quirk and mine could work really well together." Before he could respond, Hatsume Mei from the support corps inserted herself into the conversation, pink hair bobbing with excitement. "You're the Soul Emperor, right? I've got babies that would complement your abilities perfectly. Team up with me and I'll show you." Others gathered around, creating a small crowd of potential teammates. It was an unfamiliar situation for Izuku, who typically operated alone or with minimal support. He assessed each candidate objectively, considering quirk compatibility and tactical value. His final team consisted of Uraraka, whose zero gravity would enhance mobility, Tokoyami, whose dark shadow offered versatile defense and offense, and Hatsume, whose babies, support items, provided technical advantages. Zeus would serve as their mobility platform, carrying the formation above the battlefield while they targeted specific headbands. When the cavalry battle began, chaos erupted across the field. Most teams immediately targeted Bakugo, whose 10 million points made him the obvious prize. The explosive boy had formed a team with Kirishima, Sero, and Ashido, a solid combination of durability, mobility, and ranged capability. Izuku directed his team differently. "We'll target multiple mid-value headbands first," he instructed. "Build our point total while others focus on Bakugo. When they're exhausted from fighting each other, we'll make our move." The strategy proved effective. Zeus carried their formation above the fray, descending periodically for precision strikes against unprepared teams. Tokoyami's dark shadow snatched headbands with surprising speed, while Uraraka's zero gravity kept their formation lightweight and maneuverable. Hatsume's support items provided enhanced vision and grappling capabilities that extended their reach. Team Midoriya is employing classic guerrilla tactics, Present Mike announced. "Hit and run perfection while the others battle it out below." By the halfway mark, they had accumulated the second highest point total without directly engaging any major competitors. Bakugo's team remained under constant assault but had successfully defended the 10 million points through explosive counterattacks and Kirishima's hardening defense. Todoroki's team, consisting of Ida, Yaoyorozu, and Kaminari, employed a defensive strategy similar to Izuku's, building points methodically while conserving energy for the final push. 3 minutes remaining, Midnight announced. The real competition begins now. As if on cue, Todoroki's team changed tactics. Ida activated a special move, Recipro Burst, that launched their formation forward with blinding speed. They targeted Bakugo directly, Todoroki's ice creating a path while Kaminari discharged electricity to disorient defenders. The attack succeeded. Todoroki snatched the 10 million point headband in a single, perfectly executed maneuver, leaving Bakugo's team momentarily stunned. Time to move, Izuku directed his team. Zeus descended rapidly toward Todoroki's formation, which was now retreating behind an ice barrier to consolidate their position. Dark Shadow, prepare to penetrate the ice, Izuku instructed Tokoyami. Uraraka, reduce our weight to maximum on my signal. Hatsume, targeting assistance. The support student grinned, activating a scope-like device. Target locked. Their defensive formation has a 3-second vulnerability during ice generation. Now, Izuku commanded. Zeus accelerated downward as Uraraka's quirk lightened their formation to near weightlessness. They struck Todoroki's barrier at precisely the moment Todoroki needed to create new ice. Dark Shadow extending through the gap to grasp at the 10 million point headband. Todoroki reacted with impressive speed, ice erupting from his right side to intercept Dark Shadow. For a crucial moment, the outcome hung in balance. Then Izuku made his move. Maintaining his position as the team's rider, he extended his hand not toward the headband but toward Todoroki himself. Not for soul extraction, he had promised restraint, but the gesture alone carried psychological impact. Todoroki flinched involuntarily, his ice generation faltering for a split second. It was enough. Dark Shadow seized the headband and retreated as Zeus carried Izuku's team upward and away from immediate counterattack. Incredible. Present Mike's voice reached new levels of enthusiasm. Team Midoriya has captured the 10 million points with less than a minute remaining. Can they hold on? The final minute devolved into frantic attempts by multiple teams to reclaim the high-value headband. Bakugo launched himself directly at Izuku, propelled by explosions and blind rage. Todoroki created ice ramps to reach their elevated position. Others joined the assault from all directions. Izuku directed his team with calm precision. Zeus maneuvered through the air, evading attacks, while Dark Shadow defended their perimeter. When Bakugo came dangerously close, Izuku met his gaze directly, causing the explosive boy to hesitate just long enough for Zeus to create distance. 10 seconds remaining, Midnight announced. In a final, desperate maneuver, Todoroki used Yaoyorozu's creation quirk to generate a capture net, which Ida launched with another Recipro Burst. The net entangled Dark Shadow momentarily, creating an opening for Todoroki to reach for the headband. Izuku shifted his weight, altering their formation's balance just enough to pull the headband beyond Todoroki's grasp. The heterochromatic boy's fingers brushed the fabric, but failed to secure it as the final buzzer sounded. Time's up, Midnight declared. The cavalry battle is complete. When the points were tallied, Team Midoriya had secured first place with the 10 million point headband, plus their accumulated smaller values. Team Todoroki took second, Team Bakugo third, and Team Shinso, a surprising dark horse led by a general studies student, claimed the final advancement spot. As the teams dispersed, Izuku found himself approached by Todoroki, whose expression carried unusual intensity. I need to speak with you, the dual quirk user said quietly. Privately. Izuku nodded, following Todoroki to a secluded corridor beneath the stadium. There, away from cameras and classmates, Todoroki revealed his story. The quirk marriage that produced him, Endeavor's obsessive training, his mother's breakdown, and the boiling water that scarred his face. Throughout the tale, ice crystals formed and shattered around his right hand, physical manifestations of emotional turmoil usually kept rigidly controlled. I will reject him and his power, Todoroki concluded, his voice hardening. I'll win using only my right side, my mother's quirk. That's why I need to beat you, Midoriya. You're the strongest in our class. Defeating you without my fire will prove I don't need his power. Izuku considered the confession carefully. The strategic implications were clear. Todoroki was deliberately limiting his capabilities based on emotional trauma rather than tactical reasoning. It was both weakness and strength, vulnerability and resolve intertwined. Your fire isn't your father's, Izuku said finally. It's yours. Refusing to use it doesn't hurt Endeavor, it hurts you and those you could protect with your full power. Todoroki's eyes narrowed. That sounds like something he would say. It's simply logical, Izuku replied. But your choice is your own. In our match, I won't hold back to accommodate your self-imposed limitation. I wouldn't want you to, Todoroki stated. That's why I'm telling you this. When I beat you without my left side, I want you to know exactly why it matters. With that declaration, he turned and walked away, leaving Izuku to contemplate this new dimension of their rivalry. It wasn't merely about ability now, but ideology. The rejection of power versus the embrace of it, regardless of source or circumstance. The final event, one-on-one tournament matches, would bring this philosophical clash to its natural conclusion, and Izuku found himself looking forward to it with unexpected intensity. Not just as a demonstration of capability, but as a test of competing perspectives on power itself. The Soul Emperor had always believed in using every advantage available. Soon he would face someone who deliberately rejected his own strength based on principle. The outcome would resonate beyond mere victory or defeat. It would validate or challenge Izuku's fundamental approach to heroism. As he returned to the waiting area where his classmates gathered, Izuku made his decision. In the tournament, he would fight at full capability. No holding back, no strategic losses. The sports festival had become more than a stepping stone to internships. It was now a crucible for his beliefs. Let the world see what the Soul Emperor could do when truly unleashed. The tournament bracket was revealed on the stadium's massive screens, generating immediate discussion among competitors and spectators alike. Izuku analyzed the matchups methodically. First round, Midoriya versus Shinso, General Studies. Todoroki versus Sero Ida versus Hatsume. Ashido versus Aoyama. Tokoyami versus Yaoyorozu. Kirishima versus Tetsu. Uraraka versus Bakugo. Kaminari versus Shiozaki. If the favorites advanced as expected, Izuku would face Todoroki in the second round, the philosophical clash coming earlier than anticipated. Bakugo would likely reach the semifinals from the opposite bracket, setting up a potential final between the two rivals. Present Mike announced a brief intermission before the tournament began, allowing competitors time to prepare. Izuku used this period to gather intelligence on his first opponent, Hitoshi Shinso, whose quirk remained unknown despite his surprising performance in the cavalry battle. Be careful with that one, Ojiro advised when Izuku inquired. The tailed student had withdrawn from the tournament despite qualifying, citing dishonorable advancement. His quirk activates when you respond to him verbally, mind control of some kind. Valuable information. Izuku thanked Ojiro and mentally adjusted his approach. A quirk requiring verbal response could be countered through silence, a simple adaptation that neutralized Shinso's primary advantage. When the tournament commenced, Izuku walked onto the concrete stage amid thunderous applause. Across from him stood Shinso, a purple-haired student with pronounced dark circles under his eyes and a calculating expression. "So you're the famous Soul Emperor," Shinso called out as Midnight explained the rules. "Not what I expected, more like a scared kid playing villain." Izuku remained silent, recognizing the provocation for what it was. "Begin," Midnight announced, stepping back from the ring. Shinso continued his verbal assault. "I heard you extract souls from people. Pretty villainous for someone claiming to be a hero. Does it make you feel powerful, terrorizing others?" His strategy was obvious: provoke an emotional response that would trigger a verbal reply. Izuku simply walked forward, Zeus hovering slightly behind his shoulder but not expanding to combat size. No homies, no soul extraction, just direct physical confrontation. Frustration flashed across Shinso's face as his quirk activation attempts failed. "Say something! Damn it!" he finally snapped. "Are you too good to talk to someone from General Studies?" When Izuku reached him, Shinso attempted a desperate physical attack, a clumsy punch that Izuku caught effortlessly. With his free hand, Izuku gripped Shinso's shirt and lifted him with a single arm, carrying the struggling student to the boundary line before placing him outside the ring. Midoriya advances by ring out, Midnight declared, a quick and decisive victory. As Izuku turned to leave, Shinso called after him. Must be nice having a powerful quirk from birth. Some of us weren't so lucky. Izuku paused, then spoke without turning. Luck had nothing to do with it. I chose what to become. He continued walking, leaving Shinso to consider his words. The subsequent matches proceeded largely as expected. Todoroki defeated Sero with a massive ice attack that briefly encased half the stadium. Ida forfeited after Hatsume used their match as a commercial demonstration for her babies. Bakugo dominated Uraraka despite her surprisingly effective strategy. Others advanced through displays of their unique capabilities. Before long, the second round arrived, Midoriya versus Todoroki. The atmosphere crackled with anticipation as they took their positions. This wasn't just a contest between powerful students. It represented a clash between fundamentally different philosophies about power and its application. Midoriya versus Todoroki, Present Mike announced. Two of UA's most powerful first years face off in what promises to be an epic confrontation. Izuku stood calmly, Zeus expanding to combat size behind him. Across the ring, Todoroki settled into a combat stance, ice forming around his right foot in preparation for an opening attack. Begin, Midnight called. Todoroki moved instantly, sending a massive wave of ice surging across the concrete stage. The attack dwarfed what he had used against Sero, a glacier-like formation that threatened to engulf Izuku completely. Zeus expanded further, electricity crackling across its cloudy surface as Izuku remained motionless. When the ice reached him, a discharge of lightning shattered it into thousands of fragments that rained down around the stage. Impressive opening salvo from Todoroki, but Midoriya counters perfectly. Present Mick commentated. These first years are fighting at pro levels already. Todoroki didn't hesitate, launching a second ice attack from a different angle. Again, Zeus neutralized it with precisely applied electrical force. A pattern emerged, Todoroki attacking with increasingly complex ice formations, Izuku countering without apparent effort. You're holding back, Izuku observed during a momentary pause. This level of ice won't be sufficient. Frustration flashed across Todoroki's usually stoic features. I don't need my left side to defeat you, he insisted, frost forming around his right arm as his body temperature dropped from overuse. You're wrong, Izuku replied simply. He gestured, and Prometheus materialized beside Zeus, the Sun Homie's heat immediately raising the ambient temperature around the stage. Your ice is impressive, but ultimately limited without thermal regulation. Todoroki's next attack came faster but weaker, his body showing signs of cold damage as he pushed his right side beyond its natural limits. Prometheus neutralized the ice before it fully formed, the heat causing it to melt mid-creation. This is getting one-sided, folks, Present Mike announced. Todoroki seems to be struggling against Midoriya's dual quirk manifestations. In the stands, Endeavor leaned forward, his flame beard burning brighter with agitation. Use your fire, Shoto, he shouted, his voice carrying across the stadium. Stop this childish rebellion! Todoroki's expression hardened at his father's words. He launched another massive ice attack, pouring his remaining energy into a final offensive. Ice spears erupted from the ground, approaching from all angles in a display of technique that surpassed anything he'd shown previously. Izuku responded by summoning Napoleon. The sword homie extended to full length, glowing with energy as Izuku gripped its hilt. Ikoku's sovereignty, he intoned, slashing horizontally. The energy wave that erupted from Napoleon's edge cut through all of Todoroki's ice constructs simultaneously, reducing them to harmless fragments. The display of power silenced the stadium momentarily before the crowd erupted in astonished cheers. Todoroki staggered, his right side covered in frost, his breathing labored. Still, determination burned in his heterochromatic eyes as he prepared another attack. Izuku lowered Napoleon. Your rejection of your fire is making you weaker, not stronger, he stated plainly. This isn't a meaningful victory if you're fighting at half strength. Shut up, Todoroki gasped, ice forming weakly around his trembling right hand. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, Izuku countered. You're letting your father control you, not by using his power, but by refusing to use your own because of him. Either way, he determines your actions. The words struck home. Todoroki faltered, his ice crumbling before it fully formed. "Your power is yours," Izuku continued. "Use it to become the hero you want to be, not the one he demands or the one defined by rejection of him. Choose your own path, Todoroki." For a moment, the dual quirk user seemed frozen in more than just ice. Then, slowly, flames began to flicker around his left side, small at first, then growing as the ice on his right melted away. "Thank you, Midoriya," Todoroki said quietly, as fire erupted fully along his left arm. "I had forgotten." The temperature in the stadium rose dramatically as Todoroki engaged his fire quirk at full power for the first time in years. Balanced by his ice, the combinated a spectacular display of elemental control that drew gasps from the crowd. "Incredible!" Present Mike shouted. "Todoroki has activated his fire quirk. This match just reached a whole new level." In the stands, Endeavor's triumphant laughter boomed. "Yes, Shoto! Embrace your destiny." Todoroki ignored his father, focusing entirely on Izuku. "Now we can have a real match," he declared, ice and fire swirling around him in perfect balance. Izuku nodded, a rare smile crossing his features. "Show me what you can really do." What followed was a clash of elemental forces that defied the expectations of a first-year tournament. Todoroki unleashed combinations of ice and fire that complemented each other perfectly. Flash freezing followed by explosive thermal expansion, superheated steam clouds, precision temperature control that turned the entire stage into a tactical environment. Izuku responded in kind, his homies working in concert to counter each attack. Zeus neutralized ice with lightning, Prometheus absorbed and redirected fire, Napoleon cut through combined assaults with energy-infused slashes. The Soul Emperor fought with calculated precision, never wasting motion or energy. The battle reached its climax when Todoroki created his most powerful attack yet, a swirling vortex of ice and fire that converged from opposite directions, threatening to crush Izuku between opposing elemental forces. Izuku raised his hand, fingers splayed in his characteristic soul extraction gesture. Not to take Todoroki's soul, that would violate the tournament rules and his agreement with UA, but as a psychological maneuver that caused Todoroki to falter momentarily, disrupting his concentration. In that brief window, Zeus, Prometheus, and Napoleon combined their abilities, lightning, heat, and cutting force merging into a single, devastating counter that shattered Todoroki's attack and created a shockwave that knocked the dual quirk user backward. Todoroki landed hard at the edge of the ring, teetering on the boundary line. For a moment, it seemed he would recover. Then, Izuku directed Zeus to release a precise gust of wind that pushed him over the line. "Ring out," Midnight declared. "Midoriya advances to the semifinals." The crowd roared its approval as medical robots approached to check Todoroki for injuries. Izuku crossed the stage, extending his hand to his defeated opponent. "You fought well," he acknowledged, with both sides. Todoroki accepted the hand, allowing Izuku to pull him to his feet. "I lost," he stated simply, "but I feel like I found something important." "Your power," Izuku confirmed. "Use it well." As they left the stage together, a mutual respect had formed between the two powerhouses of Class 1A. Not friendship exactly, but understanding. Both recognized in the other a kindred spirit who approached heroism from a perspective different from the mainstream. The tournament continued, with Bakugo defeating his opponents through increasingly desperate battles to reach the finals. His expression when the matchup was confirmed, Midoriya versus Bakugo for the championship, combined anticipation with something close to dread. The final match of the UA Sports Festival drew record viewership. Heroes across Japan paused their patrols to watch. Civilians gathered around public screens. The stadium itself vibrated with energy as the two finalists took their positions. The moment we've all been waiting for. Present Mike's voice reached fever pitch. Katsuki Bakugo versus Izuku Midoriya for the UA Sports Festival Championship. The explosive prodigy against the mysterious Soul Emperor. Who will claim victory today? Bakugo's hands sparked with barely contained detonations, his expression a mixture of determination and rage. Across from him, Izuku stood calmly, Zeus, Prometheus, and Napoleon arrayed behind him in battle formation. "I've waited for this," Bakugo snarled. "No more holding back, Midoriya. Show me everything you've got." Izuku nodded once. "As you wish." "Begin," Midnight announced. Bakugo launched himself forward with an explosion that exceeded anything he'd shown previously, his right hand cocked back for his signature opening move. D! He roared, detonating point blank as he reached Izuku. The explosion engulfed them both in smoke and flame. When it cleared, Izuku stood unmoved, his iron balloon defense having negated the attack completely. Zeus surged forward, discharging lightning that Bakugo barely avoided with a desperate aerial maneuver. "Is that all?" Izuku asked calmly. Fury contorted Bakugo's features as he unleashed a barrage of explosions, each more powerful than the last. He attacked from multiple angles, using his quirk for mobility and offensive power simultaneously, a demonstration of skill that impressed even the pro heroes watching. Izuku countered methodically, using his homies to neutralize attacks while conserving his own energy. He allowed Bakugo to expend himself, waiting for the inevitable moment when the explosive quirk user would reach his limit. That moment came after nearly 5 minutes of continuous assault. Bakugo's arms trembled from overuse, his breathing ragged, sweat pouring down his face. Still, determination burned in his eyes as he prepared another attack. "You've always looked down on me," he gasped, ignition gauntlets glowing as they accumulated sweat. "Even when we were kids, even before your quirk. That damn look in your eyes." Izuku studied him dispassionately. "I never looked down on you, Bakugo. I simply saw you clearly." "Shut up!" Bakugo roared, launching himself forward for one final desperate attack. Both gauntlets primed, he unleashed an explosion that dwarfed all his previous efforts. A detonation so powerful that Midnight had to create a barrier to protect the spectators. When the dust settled, Izuku remained standing. His uniform was tattered, but his body showed no damage. Zeus, Prometheus, and Napoleon hovered around him, ready to counter any further attacks. Bakugo landed heavily, his gauntlets smoking and cracked from the strain. His legs buckled momentarily before he forced himself upright through sheer willpower. "Why?" he demanded, voice hoarse with exhaustion and emotion. "Why can't I beat you?" Izuku approached slowly. "Because you fight to prove something," he replied. "I fight to achieve something. Intent matters, Bakugo." For a moment it seemed Bakugo would attempt another attack, then unexpectedly he laughed, a harsh, self-deprecating sound. "Always with the damn analysis," he muttered. "Fine. Show me what the Soul Emperor can really do. End this." It was as close to acknowledgement as Bakugo could manage. Izuku nodded once, then moved with speed that left afterimages. Before Bakugo could react, Izuku had positioned himself behind him, one hand on his shoulder. "It's over," Izuku stated simply. Bakugo tensed, then slowly relaxed. "Yeah," he agreed, voice barely audible. "It is." He stepped over the boundary line voluntarily, a concession that shocked the stadium into momentary silence. "Ring out," Midnight declared after a stunned pause. "Midoriya wins. The champion of the UA Sports Festival first-year tournament is Izuku Midoriya." The crowd erupted in thunderous applause. In that moment, the Soul Emperor had demonstrated not just power, but something unexpected. Restraint, respect, and a recognition of Bakugo's pride that allowed the explosive boy to concede on his own terms rather than face a humiliating defeat. As the award ceremony commenced, with Todoroki and Tokoyami joining Izuku and Bakugo on the podium, All Might appeared to present the medals. The symbol of Peace's expression as he approached Izuku combined pride, concern, and something like wonder. "Young Midoriya," he said quietly as he placed the gold medal around Izuku's neck. "You've shown tremendous growth today, not just in power, but in understanding." Izuku accepted the medal with a respectful nod. "I'm learning what it means to be a hero," he replied. "My way." All Might's perpetual smile softened into something more genuine. "Yes," he agreed. "Your way indeed. Perhaps there's room for more than one approach to heroism after all." It was a small acknowledgement, but significant. The symbol of peace recognizing, however tentatively, the legitimacy of the Soul Emperor's path. Not endorsement, but acceptance of possibility. As the ceremony concluded and the students prepared to depart, Izuku found himself surrounded by classmates offering congratulations and professional heroes extending business cards with internship offers. The attention was unfamiliar, but not unwelcome. A tactical advantage in building the connections necessary for his future plans. Among the offers, one stood out, a plain black card with silver lettering that simply read Gran Torino. No agency name, no contact information beyond an address. All Might's reaction to seeing the card, momentary shock followed by nervous laughter, suggested this was no ordinary hero. "You should accept that one," the symbol of peace advised cryptically. "He has unique perspective that might benefit your particular approach." Izuku pocketed the card thoughtfully. The sports festival had achieved its purpose, demonstrating his capabilities while establishing his place within UA's hierarchy. Now came the next phase, professional internship, where theory would meet practice beyond the controlled environment of school exercises. The Soul Emperor had made his public debut. Japan had witnessed his power, his control, his potential. What they would make of him remained to be seen. Hero or vigilante, savior or threat, symbol of peace or emperor of fear. Izuku Midoriya intended to be all of these things and more. The path forward was clear, even if others couldn't yet see it. He would reshape heroism in his image, one soul at a time, and the world would adapt or face the consequences. The internship with Gran Torino proved transformative, though not in ways Izuku had anticipated. The diminutive, elderly hero initially appeared senile, muttering about forgotten names and stumbling around his decrepit apartment. This facade dissolved the moment Izuku let his guard down, replaced by frightening speed and combat prowess that belied the hero's advanced age. "Soul Emperor, is it?" Gran Torino had cackled after pinning Izuku to the wall with a jet-propelled kick. Fancy title for a boy who still has much to learn. What followed was a week of brutal training focused not on soul manipulation, which Gran Torino deemed already well-developed, but on physical combat, tactical thinking, and the nuances of heroic judgment. The elderly hero had been All Might's teacher decades earlier and brought the same merciless standards to Izuku's instruction. "Your power makes you nearly invulnerable," Gran Torino observed during a rare break. "That's dangerous." "Dangerous to villains," Izuku replied. "Dangerous to you," the old hero corrected sharply. "Invulnerability breeds complacency. Complacency breeds mistakes. Mistakes get people killed. Not you, perhaps, but civilians, other heroes, even your homies." It was a perspective Izuku hadn't fully considered. His iron balloon defense and overwhelming offensive capabilities had indeed fostered a certain tactical straightforwardness. Direct confrontation rather than subtlety, domination rather than adaptation. Gran Torino forced him to fight without his homies, without soul extraction, using only physical abilities and strategic thinking. The old hero moved with such speed and precision that even Izuku's enhanced durability didn't prevent pain when strikes connected at vital points. "You rely too heavily on intimidation," Gran Torino critiqued after a particularly one-sided sparring session. "Fear is a useful tool, but a limited one. What happens when you face someone who isn't afraid? Someone who can't feel fear? Someone who wants to die?" These questions lingered as Izuku returned to UA following the internship week. He had gained valuable insights but emerged with more questions than answers, a rarity for the typically confident Soul Emperor. The opportunity to test these lessons came sooner than expected. A class trip to the unforeseen simulation joint, a makeup exercise for the interrupted rescue training, went awry when Tsuyu Asui noticed something unusual in one of the simulation zones. "Midoriya," she called, pointing toward the flood zone with characteristic directness. "There's someone in the water who shouldn't be there." Izuku followed her gaze, Zeus expanding slightly on his shoulder as he concentrated. Indeed, something moved beneath the surface, something large and distinctly non-human. "Everyone back," he commanded, stepping forward as the water began to churn. A massive form erupted from the depths, humanoid but fish-like, with gills along its neck and webbed hands ending in razor-sharp claws, its eyes fixed on Izuku with predatory focus. "Soul Emperor," it gurgled, water streaming from its mouth. "The League sends their regards." Before anyone could react, the creature launched itself forward with frightening speed, claws extended toward Izuku's throat. He stood his ground, allowing the attack to connect with his iron balloon defense. To his shock, the claws penetrated, not deeply, but enough to draw blood from shallow cuts across his neck. Zeus discharged electricity immediately, forcing the creature back as Izuku touched the wounds with genuine surprise. Very few attacks had ever broken through his defense, even partially. "Antinomu," the creature announced with grotesque pride. "Designed specifically for you. Your skin isn't impenetrable to the right biological adaptations." The implication was clear. The League of Villains had studied his abilities and created a counter specifically for him. This wasn't a random attack. It was a field test of their new weapon. Aizawa moved to intervene, his capture weapon unfurling as he activated his erasure quirk. Evacuate 2. No, Izuku interrupted, his momentary surprise replaced by cold calculation. This is my fight. It was sent for me. The Antinomu circled, its movements fluid and predatory. Unlike the mindless behemoth at USJ, this creature possessed intelligence and purpose. It studied Izuku's stance, noting the positions of Zeus, Prometheus, and Napoleon as they assembled for combat. Your homies can't help you, it taunted. I'm waterproof, heat-resistant, and my skin regenerates too quickly for cutting attacks. Izuku considered this information. If true, his standard approach would be ineffective. The creature had been engineered with foreknowledge of his capabilities, a concerning development that suggested sophisticated analysis by the League. Gran Torino's lessons echoed in his mind. What happens when intimidation fails, when your standard tactics don't work? Adapt or fail, boy. Everyone clear the area, Izuku instructed his classmates. Minimum safe distance. As they retreated, Izuku assessed his options. The Antinomu possessed enhanced physical capabilities and specific resistances to his homies. Its confidence suggested these adaptations had been thoroughly tested. Direct confrontation might prove ineffective or unnecessarily prolonged. Time for a different approach. Life or death, he asked, not as prelude to soul extraction, but as a genuine question. The Antinomu laughed, a wet, gurgling sound. Death, obviously. Yours. Interesting choice, Izuku replied calmly. Then he dismissed his homies entirely. Zeus, Prometheus, and Napoleon vanished, returning to whatever space they occupied when not manifested. Izuku stood alone, apparently defenseless. Confusion flickered across the Antinomu's features before opportunistic instinct took over. It charged, claws extended for what it believed would be a decisive strike. Instead of attempting to tank the attack with his iron balloon defense, Izuku sidestepped with precision timing, using the creature's momentum against it. As it passed, he delivered a calculated strike to its gill structure, not attempting to penetrate its reinforced skin, but targeting the necessarily vulnerable respiratory system. The Antinomu gasped, momentarily disoriented by the unexpected attack. Izuku pressed his advantage, moving with speed and precision that surprised even Aizawa. Each strike targeted anatomical weaknesses, joints, sensory organs, nerve clusters, rather than attempting to overpower the creature's defenses directly. You were designed to counter the Soul Emperor's standard approach, Izuku observed as he methodically dismantled his opponent's fighting ability, but adaptation goes both ways. The Antinomu grew increasingly desperate, its attacks becoming wilder and less coordinated. When it attempted to retreat to the water, Izuku intercepted it with a perfectly timed sweep that disrupted its balance. As the creature fell, Izuku placed his hand on its chest, not for soul extraction, but for something else. A barely perceptible pulse of energy traveled from his palm into the Antinomu's body. "What did you do?" it demanded, suddenly struggling to move its limbs properly. "Soul perception," Izuku replied. A technique he had developed but rarely used, the ability to sense and temporarily disrupt the connection between soul and body without extraction. Your soul is artificial, like the original Nomu's. Unstable, disconnected from your physical form in ways that create vulnerabilities. The Antinomu's movements became increasingly uncoordinated as Izuku maintained contact, his power interfering with the already tenuous soul-body connection. Within moments, the creature lay immobilized, its engineered body unable to respond to its fragmented soul's commands. "A temporary effect," Izuku explained to Aizawa, who approached cautiously, "but sufficient for containment." The pro-hero studied him with newfound assessment. That wasn't soul extraction. "No," Izuku confirmed, "a different application of the same fundamental ability. Less permanent, less ethically complicated." Aizawa's expression revealed nothing, but he nodded once. Acknowledgement, perhaps even approval. "I'll contact the authorities. This creature may provide valuable intelligence about the League's operations." As the situation stabilized and security protocols engaged, Izuku found himself surrounded by classmates with questions and expressions of concern for his injuries. The shallow cuts on his neck had already stopped bleeding, but their significance remained, proof that his defenses weren't absolute. that adaptation was necessary even for the Soul Emperor.
Dude!
You fought that thing without your homies, Kirishima exclaimed, genuine admiration in his voice. That was so manly. I thought you needed them for your quirk, Uraraka added, confusion evident in her expression. They're tools, not crutches, Izuku replied simply. Sometimes different tools are required. Todoroki, observing from a few paces away, nodded slightly, understanding the lesson in a way others might not. Adaptation, versatility, growth beyond one's established patterns. These were concepts the dual quirk user had recently embraced himself. In the days that followed, analysis of the captured anti-Nomu revealed disturbing details about the League's operation. The creature contained genetic material from multiple quirk users, artificially combined to create specific counter abilities to known heroes. Its existence proved the League's resources and scientific capabilities extended far beyond initial estimates. More personally, the encounter forced Izuku to reconsider aspects of his approach. The Soul Emperor's reputation had been built on overwhelming force and intimidation, effective against conventional villains, but potentially limiting against opponents specifically designed to counter him. Gran Torino's lessons took on new significance. Versatility, adaptability, and tactical flexibility would be essential moving forward. Soul extraction remained his most powerful technique, but developing additional applications of his quirk would provide options when standard approaches failed. This evolution in thinking arrived just in time. As summer approached and UA prepared for its training camp, storm clouds gathered on the horizon. The League of Villains had tested their countermeasures and gathered intelligence. Their next move would not be a mere probe, but a coordinated strike, and Izuku Midoriya, the Soul Emperor, would need every tool at his disposal to face what was coming. The forest training camp began with promise, but descended into nightmare. Class 1A, alongside their 1B counterparts, had barely settled into the routine of intensive quirk development when the attack came. A wall of blue flame split the night, dividing the forest into isolated sections. Gas with sleep-inducing properties drifted through certain areas, incapacitating students before they could organize. Within minutes, chaos reigned as the League of Villains' Vanguard Action Squad executed their carefully planned assault. Izuku had been training alone when the attack began, pushing his soul perception technique to new limits under the starlit sky. Zeus provided illumination while Prometheus and Napoleon stood guard. The distant explosion and sudden appearance of blue fire immediately signaled danger. Villain attack, he concluded, recalling his homies to combat formation. Zeus, aerial reconnaissance. The thundercloud expanded and rose above the tree line, electricity crackling as it surveyed the surrounding forest. Through their connection, Izuku received impressions of multiple fires, scattered students, and organized villain movement throughout the area. Targeted operation, he assessed. Not random destruction. They're searching for something or someone. Zeus returned with visual confirmation. Bakugo and Tokoyami were being pursued by a villain with a measuring device, while other League members engaged UA students and teachers in separate skirmishes. The pattern became clear. This was an abduction attempt, not a direct assault. The League wanted specific students, likely for their quirks or potential as hostages. Izuku moved through the forest with practiced stealth. Zeus condensed to minimize visibility. His first encounter came when he discovered Uraraka and Tsuyu defending an unconscious pixie bob from a muscular villain with multiple arms. Life or death? Izuku announced his presence with his signature question, stepping from the shadows with Zeus expanding behind him. The villain, later identified as Magni, spun toward the voice, magnetic quirk activating instinctively. The Soul Emperor. Shigaraki mentioned you might interfere. Then he should have sent more than you, Izuku replied calmly, directing Zeus forward in a lightning discharge that Magni barely avoided. What followed was a brief but intense confrontation. Magni attempted to use her magnetism quirk to repel Izuku, apparently unaware that his iron balloon defense negated such force-based attacks. When direct offense failed, she changed tactics that threatening the unconscious pro-hero. Back off, or I crush her skull, Magni demanded, positioning 1 foot above Pixie Bob's head. Izuku didn't hesitate. Napoleon launched forward with blinding speed, the flat of its blade striking Magni's leg with precise force that disrupted her balance without causing permanent damage. In the moment of distraction, Prometheus created a heat barrier between the villain and Pixie Bob, while Zeus discharged a carefully modulated electrical current that temporarily paralyzed Magni's nervous system. "Secure her," Izuku instructed Uraraka and Tsuyu, who quickly bound the incapacitated villain with capture tape from their hero costumes. "Midoriya Kero," Tsuyu said, her typically calm demeanor showing rare strain. "They're after Bakugo and possibly others. We heard them talking." This confirmed his assessment. "Where were they last seen?" "Eastern section, near the cliffside training area," Uraraka replied. "Todoroki and Shoji were heading there too." Izuku nodded. "Get Pixie Bob to safety and alert the teachers about captured villains. I'll intercept the abduction team." As he departed, Uraraka called after him. "Be careful, Midoriya. There's someone with a warp quirk like Kurogiri." Valuable intelligence. A warp quirk would explain the League's extraction strategy, quick entry and exit without conventional escape routes. It would need to be neutralized first to prevent successful abduction. Izuku traveled swiftly through the burning forest, Zeus providing occasional aerial views to navigate the chaotic battlefield. He encountered and dispatched 2 minor villains en route, using soul perception rather than extraction to neutralize them efficiently. When he reached the eastern cliffside, the situation had deteriorated significantly. Todoroki and Shoji stood back to back, defending against Moonfish, a straight-jacketed villain with blade-extending teeth. Nearby, Bakugo and Tokoyami fought desperately against Mr. Compress, whose quirk allowed him to transform people into small marble-like spheres. Most concerning, a swirling black vortex had appeared at the forest edge, the warp quirk user Uraraka had mentioned, preparing an extraction point. Izuku assessed priorities instantly. Neutralize the warp gate first, then address immediate threats to potential abduction targets. "Zeus," he commanded, directing the thundercloud toward the portal with maximum discharge. Lightning struck the vortex directly, causing it to fluctuate and temporarily destabilize. With the escape route compromised, Izuku turned his attention to Mr. Compress, who had noticed his arrival with visible alarm. "Soul Emperor," the theatrical villain called, voice artificially jovial despite his obvious concern. "Our intelligence suggested you'd be elsewhere tonight? How inconsiderate of you to ruin our choreography." Bakugo snarled, explosions erupting from his palms as he attempted to keep distance between himself and the compression villain. "Midoriya, this mask freak turns people into marbles." "I'm aware," Izuku replied calmly, directing Prometheus toward Moonfish to assist Todoroki and Shoji, while he personally engaged Mr. Compress. The magician-themed villain moved with surprising agility, his combat style relying on misdirection and quick touches to activate his compression quirk. He produced various small objects from his costume, smoke bombs, flash grenades, caltrops, creating distractions while maneuvering for a clear shot at his targets. "Your reputation precedes you," Mr. Compress commented as he dodged a precision strike from Napoleon. "But you can't compress what you can't touch, and you can't extract souls through my marbles." Quite the impasse, wouldn't you agree? Izuku didn't respond to the taunt, maintaining focus on the villain's movement patterns. Mr. Compress relied heavily on his right hand for quirk activation, telegraphed his direction changes with slight shoulder shifts, and consistently created maximum distance after each attack attempt, all valuable tactical information. When the villain launched another compression attempt aimed at Tokoyami, Izuku intercepted perfectly. Rather than attempting to block or counter directly, he guided Mr. Compress's momentum into an overextension, then delivered a precise strike to the nerve cluster at the elbow, temporarily paralyzing the villain's quirk arm. "Predictable," Izuku stated as Mr. Compress recoiled in pain and surprise. "Your technique relies on theatrical distraction rather than combat fundamentals." Before he could press his advantage, a new threat emerged from the forest. Dabi, the blue flame user responsible for the initial forest fires. His scarred face contorted with cruel amusement as he launched azure flames toward the entire group. "Compress, stop playing around," Dabi called. "Shigaraki wants them now." The fire surged forward in a wave that threatened to engulf everyone present. Todoroki responded instantly, creating an ice barrier that momentarily checked the advance, but began melting almost immediately under the intense heat. His flames exceed my ice production capacity, Todoroki warned, struggling to maintain the barrier. Izuku directed Prometheus forward. The sun homie absorbed the blue flames, incorporating their heat into its own mass and growing visibly in the process. This unexpected counter caused Dabi to falter momentarily, his signature attack proving ineffective against a manifestation designed specifically to control fire. "What the hell?" the flame villain muttered, increasing his output with visible strain. Prometheus continued absorbing the enhanced flames, growing brighter and hotter until it radiated with near-solar intensity. The forest clearing illuminated as if at midday, shadows sharpening to painful clarity beneath the artifice. "Your flames fuel my homie," Izuku informed Dabi dispassionately. "Continue if you wish to make it stronger." Fury replaced surprise on Dabi's scarred features. He redirected his attack toward Izuku directly, flames hot enough to melt steel engulfing the Soul Emperor's position. Izuku stood unmoved as the fire washed over him. His uniform charred and flaked away in places, but his iron balloon defense held against the thermal assault. When the flames subsided, he remained in place, expression unchanged despite the smoldering remnants of his clothing. "Is that all?" he asked calmly. The psychological impact was immediate and visible. Dabi's confidence cracked, uncertainty flashing across his usually sadistic features. Mr. Compress, still favoring his injured arm, backed away several steps. Even Moonfish, a nearly mindless killer, hesitated in his assault on Todoroki and Shoji. The moment of advantage was short-lived. From the forest emerged a new figure, muscular to the point of deformity, with exposed brain tissue similar to the original Nomu, but with evident sapience in his eyes. He surveyed the scene with disturbing intelligence before focusing on Izuku. "Soul Emperor," the creature growled, its voice surprisingly articulate. "I am muscular. The doctor said you'd be a worthy test for my enhancements." Unlike the anti-Nomu from earlier encounters, this villain showed no fear, only anticipation, even excitement at the prospect of confrontation. His muscle fibers visibly multiplied beneath his skin, layers building upon layers until his already massive frame nearly doubled in size. "The others can retrieve the targets," Muscular announced to his fellow League members. "The Emperor is mine." The declaration created a tactical problem. If Izuku engaged Muscular directly, the other villains could potentially complete their abduction mission. If he prioritized protecting Bakugo and Tokoyami, Muscular would have free rein to attack others. The decision was made for him when Muscular launched forward with devastating speed, his enhanced muscle fibers propelling him like a human missile directly toward Izuku. The impact, when it came, actually moved the Soul Emperor, pushing him back several meters despite his iron balloon defense. "You felt that, didn't you?" Muscular laughed maniacally. "The doctor studied your abilities thoroughly. My muscle fibers are specifically engineered to counter your defense. Density matched to penetration threshold." To demonstrate, he delivered a punch that connected with Izuku's chest. Unlike most attacks that simply bounced off, this one transferred force effectively, causing Izuku to expel breath involuntarily. A genuine threat, the second engineered specifically to counter his abilities. The League was evolving their approach with concerning speed. "Todoroki," Izuku called, maintaining focus on Muscular. "Get Bakugo and Tokoyami to safety. I'll handle this." The dual quirk user hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Understood. Shoji, assist me." As they moved to secure the potential abduction targets, Dabi and Mr. Compress attempted to intercept. Zeus and Prometheus intervened, creating an elemental barrier that forced the villains to retreat temporarily. Moonfish slithered forward on extended tooth blades, apparently intent on joining the assault on Todoroki's group, but Napoleon intercepted, the sword homie's edge glinting in Prometheus's artificial sunlight. "Your opponents are worthy of your full attention," Muscular taunted, muscles bulging further as he prepared another assault. "No homies to save you this time, Emperor." Izuku recalled Gran Torino's training and the lessons from the anti-Nomu encounter. Standard approaches wouldn't work here. This opponent required adaptation. When Muscular attacked again, Izuku didn't attempt to tank the blow. Instead, he redirected the force, using the villain's momentum to guide him past his intended target. The technique was reminiscent of Gran Torino's movement style: efficiency over power, precision over brute force. Muscular recovered quickly, surprise evident on his features. "Learned some new tricks, have you?" "Won't save you." The villain's next attack came as a barrage. Dozens of blows delivered with machine gun rapidity, each carrying force that would have shattered concrete. Izuku evaded most, deflected others, and accepted a few that connected but with reduced impact due to his positioning. As the exchange continued, Izuku systematically gathered data. Muscular's muscle fibers provided tremendous offensive power, but reduced his flexibility. His reaction time decreased slightly after maximum exertion. His right side activated muscle enhancement marginally faster than his left. All tactical advantages, however slight. "Stop dodging and fight me," Muscular demanded, frustration mounting as his supposedly perfect counter failed to deliver the decisive victory promised by the Doctor, almost certainly the same individual responsible for the Nomu program. "As you wish," Izuku replied. When Muscular launched his next attack, a haymaker with enough force to level a building, Izuku stepped inside the blow rather than away from it. His right hand extended toward the villain's chest, fingers splayed in the familiar soul extraction gesture. Muscular's eyes widened with momentary fear, exactly the emotional response Izuku had anticipated. Fear, even briefly experienced, created the necessary vulnerability in the soul-body connection. "Life or death?" Izuku asked, though the question was merely formality at this point. "You can't." Muscular began, but the extraction had already begun. Unlike conventional soul extraction, Izuku employed a modified technique, targeting not the villain's entire soul fragment, but specifically the connection between soul and quirk. The procedure was delicate, precise, requiring concentration that left him momentarily vulnerable to external attacks. Dabi noticed the opening and launched a desperate flame attack toward Izuku's exposed back. Prometheus, still engaged with defending Todoroki's retreat, couldn't intercept in time. The flames would have struck true if not for unexpected intervention. A massive wall of ice erupted between Izuku and the attack, absorbing the thermal assault. Todoroki had returned, determination evident in his heterochromatic eyes. "Focus on your opponent," the dual quirk user called. "I'll handle Dabi." The momentary protection was sufficient. Izuku completed the modified extraction, drawing forth not a complete soul fragment, but a glowing strand that represented Muscular's quirk-soul connection. As it separated, the villain's enhanced muscles immediately began to shrink, receding to normal human proportions. "What did you do to me?" Muscular demanded, panic replacing confidence as he attempted to activate his quirk without result. "Temporary quirk severance," Izuku explained, studying the glowing strand hovering above his palm. "Your quirk factor remains, but the soul connection that activates it has been disrupted. In Desur, it will regenerate eventually after you've served your prison sentence." With Muscular neutralized, the tide of battle shifted dramatically. Deprived of their enhanced muscle specialist and facing multiple capable defenders, the League's extraction team began to falter. When the Warp Gate user, a villain called Twice with duplication abilities, attempted to re-establish the escape route, Zeus intercepted with a precision lightning strike that disrupted his concentration. "This operation is compromised," Dabi announced after a particularly powerful combined attack from Todoroki's ice and fire forced him to retreat several meters. "Kurogiri will be displeased, but we must withdraw." Mr. Compress nodded agreement, producing a smoke bomb from his costume. "A tactical retreat then. Until next time, UA students." Before they could escape, however, professional heroes arrived. Eraserhead and Vlad King, followed by several others who had been delayed by diversionary attacks elsewhere in the forest. The villains found themselves suddenly outnumbered and outmatched. In the confusion that followed, most of the League members managed to escape through hastily created warp gates, smaller and less stable than their usual portals, but sufficient for emergency extraction. Only Muscular and Moonfish remained behind, the former quirkless and the latter incapacitated by a combination of Napoleon's attacks and Tokoyami's dark shadow. As the situation stabilized and medical attention was provided to injured students, Aizawa approached Izuku with an unreadable expression. "That technique," the homeroom teacher said quietly, "quirk severance. It's not in any of your registered abilities." "A recent development," Izuku acknowledged, "more controlled than full soul extraction. Less ethically problematic." Aizawa studied him for a long moment. "You're evolving your approach." It wasn't a question, but Izuku nodded confirmation. Adaptation is necessary. The League is developing specific counters to known hero techniques, including mine. Muscular mentioned the doctor, Aizawa noted. Consistent with intelligence about a quirk researcher working with the League, your encounter may provide valuable information. The conversation paused as medical robots arrived to secure Muscular for transport. The villain glared at Izuku with hatred beyond reason. "This isn't over, Soul Emperor," he snarled. "The League will break you eventually. The doctor has your number." Izuku regarded him dispassionately. "Tell your doctor that adaptation goes both ways. His data is already outdated." As Muscular was taken away, Bakugo approached unexpectedly. The explosive boy's expression contained its usual intensity, but something else lingered beneath. Reluctant acknowledgement, perhaps even respect. "They were after me," Bakugo stated flatly. "Yes," Izuku confirmed, "your quirk has significant offensive potential. The League likely wants to either recruit you or study your quirk factor for their Nomu program." Bakugo's hands sparked with controlled detonations, a nervous habit when confronting uncomfortable truths. "I wouldn't have gone willingly." "I know," Izuku replied. "That's why they brought compression and warp quirk users. Consent wasn't part of their calculation." The forest burned behind them as Izuku surveyed the aftermath of the League's failed abduction attempt. Medical teams tended to injured students, while police secured the captured villains. Through the chaos, Izuku maintained his characteristic calm, already processing the strategic implications of what had transpired. "I need to speak with you," he told Aizawa quietly. "Privately." The exhausted teacher raised an eyebrow, but nodded, leading Izuku away from the others to a clearing untouched by Dabi's flames. During the confrontation, Izuku began without preamble, "I attached tracking homies to several League members." Aizawa's eyes widened fractionally, the closest the stoic hero came to showing surprise. "Tracking homies?" "Minor soul fragments, extracted during combat and configured for location tracking rather than combat utility." Izuku held out his palm where a tiny, barely visible wisp hovered. "Similar to Zeus, but microscopic and specialized. They're currently following Dabi, Mr. Compress, and Twice back to their hideout." Aizawa's expression shifted from surprise to calculation. "You placed trackers on retreating villains without authorization." "I did what was necessary," Izuku replied evenly. "The League is evolving their tactics. They're specifically engineering counters to known heroes, including me. This represents an intelligence opportunity we cannot afford to waste." Aizawa considered this, fatigue battling with professional obligation. Finally, he sighed. "This information needs to reach the proper authorities immediately. But, Midoriya," his gaze sharpened, "there will be questions about methods. Soul-based tracking wasn't part of our agreement." "Results matter more than methods in this case," Izuku countered. "These homies provide real-time intelligence that conventional tracking cannot match. They're undetectable by technology and quirk detection." The teacher didn't argue further, recognizing the tactical value despite ethical concerns. "We'll discuss this with Principal Nezu and the relevant agencies. For now, monitor the signals but take no independent action." Izuku nodded, though they both knew the agreement was conditional at best. The Soul Emperor operated by his own rules when necessary. As they returned to the evacuation point, Bakugo approached, his usual aggression tempered by something resembling thoughtfulness. "Midoriya," he said, "you tracked them, didn't you?" Izuku studied him briefly. "Yes." Bakugo nodded, a decision crystallizing in his expression. "When you go after them, and we both know you will, I want in." "That's not your decision to make," Izuku replied. "This operation will require strategic precision, not explosive force." "They targeted me," Bakugo growled, palms sparking. "You deserve to recover and prepare for what comes next," Izuku interrupted. "The League will make another attempt. When that happens, you'll need to be ready." Their eyes locked in silent challenge before Bakugo finally relented with a frustrated exhale. "Fine, but next time I fight my own battles." Izuku accepted this with a slight nod. Progress, of a sort. Their rivalry had evolved into something approaching mutual respect, though neither would admit it openly. As UA students were evacuated and the training camp officially terminated, Izuku maintained constant awareness of his tracking homies. Through their connection, he sensed their movement through the city, eventually converging at a location in Kamino Ward, a significant intelligence breakthrough. Within hours, he found himself in an emergency meeting at UA, facing not just school officials, but representatives from the Hero Public Safety Commission, the National Police Agency, and several top-ranking pro-heroes. "Let me be absolutely clear," the commission representative stated, her stern demeanor enhanced by her immaculate suit and rigid posture. "While the intelligence provided by UA student Midoriya is potentially valuable, it was obtained through unauthorized quirk usage bordering on vigilantism." Principal Nezu, ever diplomatic, steepled his pause. "Commissioner Yamada, I believe the extraordinary circumstances don't change laws, Principal," she interrupted. "Soul manipulation for tracking purposes wasn't covered in the accommodations made for Midoriya's unusual methods." All Might, present in his weakened form to conserve energy, cleared his throat. "With respect, Commissioner, we're facing an unprecedented threat. The League's ability to create specialized countermeasures for specific heroes suggests sophisticated research and development capabilities. If young Midoriya's tracking can lead us to their base of operations, then we'll utilize conventional means to confirm and act on that intelligence," Commissioner Yamada finished firmly. "We cannot base a major operation solely on information obtained through questionable methods." Izuku, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke. "The tracking homies are currently converging at a specific location in Kamino Ward. Based on movement patterns and duration since the forest incident, this is likely their primary base rather than a temporary waypoint." He approached the digital map displayed on the conference room wall, indicating precise coordinates. "If you cross-reference with property records, you'll find this building was purchased through a shell company 6 months ago. Power usage has increased by 47% since acquisition, suggesting significant interior modifications." The police representative leaned forward. "How could you possibly know the power usage statistics?" "I researched all potential League hideouts in preparation for this meeting," Izuku replied simply. The tracking homies merely confirmed what was already a high-probability target based on conventional intelligence gathering. This was stretching the truth considerably. He had accessed the information after the tracking was established, but it provided the officials with plausible deniability. They could pretend his soul-based tracking merely corroborated legitimate investigation rather than led it. Commissioner Yamada's expression remained skeptical, but the logic was difficult to refute. Assuming this information is accurate, we'll need to establish surveillance and develop an appropriate response plan. "Time is a factor," Izuku countered. "The homies detect significant activity suggesting preparation for departure. The League knows their training camp operation failed. They'll be relocating soon." Endeavor, who had been silently observing from the corner, finally spoke. "The boy's right. If we wait for traditional surveillance confirmation, we risk losing them entirely." Coming from the newly appointed number 2 hero, the assessment carried significant weight. A tense silence fell over the room as the officials weighed their options. "I have a condition for providing further intelligence," Izuku stated into the quiet. Commissioner Yamada's eyes narrowed. "You're not in a position to make demands, young man." "I'm in exactly that position," Izuku replied calmly. "My tracking homies are undetectable, untraceable, and currently providing real-time information on the League's most dangerous members. I can recall them at any time." The threat hung in the air, unspoken, but clear. "What condition?" All Might asked quietly. "I participate in the operation," Izuku said, "not as a student or civilian asset, but as an active combatant." The room erupted in objections. Commissioner Yamada's voice rose above the others. "Absolutely not. You're an unlicensed first-year student. This would violate dozens of protocols and regulations." "It would," Izuku acknowledged, "but my capabilities exceed most pro-heroes, particularly against targets specifically engineered to counter conventional quirks. More importantly, I can locate and identify League members through my tracking homies with perfect accuracy, even in chaotic combat conditions." Endeavor stepped forward, flames intensifying around his face. The Soul Emperor has proven himself against villains engineered specifically to counter him. His tactical value in this operation cannot be dismissed based on licensing technicalities. The support from Japan's second-ranked hero silenced several objections, though Commissioner Yamada remained unmoved. This is precisely the type of vigilante thinking we cannot endorse. If we allow students to participate in high-level operations because they've taken matters into their own hands, we undermine the entire hero system. The system is already undermined, Izuku replied flatly. The League has twice penetrated UA security. They've developed specialized counters for top heroes. They nearly abducted students from a supposedly secure training facility. Traditional methods are failing. All Might winced at the assessment, but didn't contradict it. After a moment of heavy silence, he sighed. Perhaps a compromise is possible. Young Midoriya could serve in an intelligence capacity, remaining outside the direct combat zone, but providing real-time tracking information to the operation team. Izuku considered this. It wasn't ideal, he wanted direct engagement with the League, but it established his involvement officially. Once the operation began, circumstances could create opportunities for more direct intervention. Acceptable, he agreed, with one addition. If All for One is present, I participate directly. His threat level justifies exceptional measures. The name sent a ripple through the room. All for One, the legendary villain whose existence many still considered rumor rather than fact. All Might's expression darkened at the mention of his nemesis. All for One is my responsibility, the symbol of peace stated firmly. Your responsibility, but not exclusively your battle, Izuku countered. You faced him twice before. The first time nearly killed you. The second cost you your prime form. A third confrontation without adequate support would be tactically unsound. The assessment, delivered with clinical precision, struck at All Might's greatest vulnerability, his diminished power and limited transformation time. The skeletal hero's shoulders slumped slightly, though his eyes remained resolute. We're getting ahead of ourselves, Commissioner Yamada interjected. There's no confirmation that All for One is even associated with the current League of Villains. There is, Izuku stated. The Dr. Muscular referenced, the one creating specialized countermeasures, matches historical descriptions of All for One's personal physician. The Nomu technology bears his signature, and the League's resources suggest backing from a well-established power. The analysis silenced further objections, replacing them with uneasy recognition of the threat's magnitude. 24 hours, the commissioner finally conceded. We'll establish surveillance, verify the intelligence, and develop an operation plan. Midoriya will provide tracking data to the command center, but remain outside the combat zone unless specifically authorized by the operation commander. Izuku nodded, accepting the compromise while knowing circumstances would likely override such restrictions once the operation began. The Soul Emperor would be where he needed to be when the time came. As the meeting concluded and officials dispersed to begin preparation, All Might approached Izuku privately. Young Midoriya, he began, voice low to avoid being overheard. There's something you should understand about All for One. Izuku waited silently. If he is indeed behind the League, this confrontation will be unlike anything you've experienced. His power isn't just in the quirks he's stolen, but in his tactical brilliance and absolute ruthlessness. He's survived for generations by eliminating threats before they fully materialize. You believe he'll target me specifically, Izuku concluded. All Might nodded grimly. The Soul Emperor's reputation has grown too significant to ignore. Your ability to extract and utilize soul fragments represents a direct counter to his quirk-stealing strategy. He won't allow such a threat to develop further. Good, Izuku replied simply. Let him come for me. The symbol of peace studied him with troubled eyes. Your confidence is admirable, but All for One has defeated opponents who believed themselves invincible. Don't underestimate him. I never underestimate opponents, Izuku assured him. But neither do I fear them unnecessarily. If All for One appears, I'll be ready. As All Might departed, clearly unconvinced, Izuku felt Zeus shift slightly on his shoulder. The homie had condensed to minimal size during the meeting, but now expanded slightly in response to Izuku's rising anticipation. Through his connection to the tracking homies, he sensed increased activity at the Camino Ward location, movement patterns suggesting urgent preparation. The League was indeed planning to relocate, exactly as he'd predicted, but there was something else, a presence his tracking couldn't quite define, a void within the building where his awareness simply stopped. Not interference or blocking, but an absence so complete it could only be deliberate. All for One. The villain's power must include some capacity to sever or shield against soul-based connections. Interesting, and potentially useful information for what was to come. Izuku left UA grounds as darkness fell, making his way to a nearby park where he could meditate undisturbed. Zeus expanded to combat size beside him, while Prometheus and Napoleon materialized to complete his primary trio. "We face our greatest challenge soon," he told them quietly. "The source of the Nomu, the power behind the League. Prepare accordingly." The homies responded with heightened energy. Zeus crackling with intensified electricity, Prometheus burning brighter, Napoleon's edge gleaming with sharper definition. Through his connection, Izuku felt their anticipation mirroring his own. For the Soul Emperor, the coming battle wasn't just another villain confrontation. It represented the ultimate test of his methods and philosophy. Traditional heroism had failed to contain the League. Conventional ethics had hampered effective response. Now, finally, his approach would prove its superiority through results that couldn't be denied. Let all for one come. The Soul Emperor would be waiting. And when the confrontation ended, the hero world would never be the same. The raid command center buzzed with tense activity as final preparations were completed. Surveillance had confirmed significant villain presence at the Camino Ward location, including several known League members. Property records revealed a complex of buildings with interconnected basements, ideal for concealing operations and providing multiple escape routes. Izuku sat at a dedicated console, monitoring his tracking homie's signals while wearing the communication headset provided by the operation team. Around him, pro heroes received final briefings on their assignments and approach vectors. All units in final position, reported the tactical commander, a steely-eyed hero specializing in coordinated operations, waiting for authorization to proceed. Commissioner Yamada, overseeing the operation personally, nodded. Authorization granted, begin Phase 1. The raid launched with synchronicity that even Izuku found impressive. Multiple hero teams breached the complex simultaneously from different entry points, quirks activating in combinations designed to maximize surprise and containment. Through the command center screens, Izuku watched Mamad Lady enlarge to create a perimeter blockade, while Kamui Woods extended capture branches through windows and doorways. Gang Orca led a strike team through the main entrance, while Edgeshot compressed his body to infiltrate through ventilation systems. Movement detected in East Sector, Izuku reported, sensing one of his tracking homies accelerating. Twice as attempting to exit through the loading bay. The tactical commander routed a secondary team immediately, intercepting the villain before he could establish an escape route. Similar adjustments occurred throughout the operation's first minutes, Izuku's tracking providing crucial real-time intelligence that allowed heroes to adapt faster than villains could react. "This is working better than anticipated," Commissioner Yamada acknowledged grudgingly. "Your tracking is proving valuable, Midoriya." Izuku didn't respond to the belated validation, his focus entirely on the operation. Something felt wrong. The League members were being captured too easily, offering minimal resistance despite their demonstrated capabilities at the training camp. And the void in his tracking awareness, the presence he suspected was all for one, remained stationary, seemingly unconcerned by the raid. "They're decoys," he realized suddenly, rising from his console. "This entire location is a diversion." The commissioner turned sharply. "What are you talking about? We've confirmed multiple League members." "Twice as duplication quirk," Izuku interrupted. "He's created copies of key members to maintain the appearance of occupation while the actual League relocated elsewhere." He focused on his tracking homies, seeking the subtle differences that would confirm his theory. There, the Dabi homie was tracking a duplicate. The real Dabi's flame signature would have higher soul resonance, and Mr. Compress, the tracking showed the surgical precision of his movements, but lacked the theatrical flourishes that defined the original. "We need to abort this operation," Izuku stated. "The real targets are elsewhere." Before anyone could respond, a new alert flashed across the command center screens. "Multiple villain attacks reported," the communications officer announced. "Simultaneous incidents at Hosu, Musutafu, and it's a coordinated distraction," Izuku concluded. "While our primary forces are committed here, they're executing their actual objective elsewhere." Commissioner Yamada's expression hardened. Redirect available heroes to the new incident locations. Maintain the Camino operation. Even duplicates need to be contained. That's insufficient, Izuku countered. The pattern suggests a major operation requiring hero dispersion. The League wants us spread thin while they execute their primary objective. He closed his eyes, concentrating on his tracking homie's signals, seeking patterns within the chaos. Most tracked duplicates, but one, the smallest fragment he'd attached to Twice himself, was moving with purpose rather than defensive reaction. There, he said, opening his eyes and pointing to the map display. Warehouse District, South Camino. That's where Twice is actually heading. The commissioner hesitated, clearly reluctant to divert resources based solely on Izuku's tracking. We can't abandon confirmed targets for speculation. Then I'll investigate myself, Izuku stated, removing his headset and moving toward the exit. Midoriya, the commissioner called sharply. You are not authorized to leave this command center. Izuku paused at the doorway. The agreement was that I would remain here unless All for One appeared. My tracking indicates a void in soul perception at the warehouse location, consistent with his presence. I'm therefore invoking the exception clause. It was a technical interpretation of their agreement. The void could be caused by other factors, but Izuku had no intention of remaining sidelined while the actual confrontation occurred elsewhere. Before further objections could be raised, Endeavor stepped forward. I'll accompany him, the Flame Hero announced. If his intelligence is accurate, we can't afford to ignore it. If not, I'll personally ensure he returns to the command center. The commissioner's lips thinned in disapproval, but Endeavor's status as the number 2 hero made direct refusal politically difficult. Fine, but this is a reconnaissance mission only. No engagement without confirmation and backup. Izuku nodded, though all present recognized the promise was conditional at best. As they departed the command center, Endeavor fixed Izuku with an evaluative stare. That was clever manipulation of authority restrictions, the Flame Hero noted. My son mentioned your strategic thinking. Todoroki understands tactics, Izuku acknowledged. He's learning to apply them beyond combat. They moved swiftly through the night-darkened streets, Endeavor's flames providing illumination, while Zeus hovered above Izuku's shoulder, ready to expand to combat size at a moment's notice. You truly believe All for One is present? Endeavor asked as they approached the warehouse district. Yes, Izuku replied simply. The League's pattern of escalation suggests culmination. Their failed abduction attempt, the coordinated distractions, they're building towards something significant. All for One would want to oversee such an operation personally. Endeavor nodded, flames intensifying slightly. If you're right, this will be the most dangerous villain confrontation in a generation. All Might nearly died in their last encounter. All Might faced him alone, Izuku noted. Tactical error. A grim smile crossed Endeavor's scarred features. You believe we can succeed where the symbol of peace failed? I believe in appropriate application of force, Izuku corrected. All for One's power comes from quirk accumulation and tactical superiority. My soul extraction directly counters both advantages. They reached the warehouse perimeter, taking cover behind abandoned shipping containers while surveying the target building. Unlike the decoy location, this warehouse showed minimal external activity. No guards, no visible security measures, nothing to draw attention. But Izuku's tracking homie indicated Twice was inside, and the void in his soul perception remained centered in the building's core. Conventional approach would be surveillance followed by coordinated breach, Endeavor stated, eyes scanning for vulnerabilities. But that assumes conventional opponents. We don't have time for conventional, Izuku replied. My tracking indicates multiple presences arriving. This is their actual gathering point. He closed his eyes, focusing on the tiny tracking homie attached to Twice. Through their connection, he sensed the villain's position within the warehouse and, more importantly, the layout around him. A large open space with a central platform, multiple figures converging, and at the center, the void where his soul perception simply stopped. Direct approach, Izuku decided, opening his eyes. They know we're coming regardless. Surprise is irrelevant. Endeavor considered this, then nodded sharply. My agency's backup team is 3 minutes out. I'll signal the command center for additional support. He activated his communicator, reporting their position and findings with terse efficiency. As the Flame Hero coordinated reinforcements, Izuku prepared himself for the coming confrontation. Zeus expanded to full combat size, electricity crackling across its cloudy surface. Prometheus materialized beside it, heat radiating in waves that distorted the air. Napoleon extended from Izuku's hand, the sword homie's edge gleaming with deadly potential. "Ready?" Endeavor asked, finishing his communication. Izuku nodded once, expression coldly determined. "Life or death," he murmured, not as his usual question, but as acknowledgement of the stakes they faced. They moved toward the warehouse entrance with coordinated purpose. No stealth, no hesitation, just direct confrontation with whatever awaited within. Endeavor's flames illuminated their approach, a beacon announcing their presence to any watching eyes. The warehouse door exploded inward under the combined force of Endeavor's fire spear and Zeus's lightning strike. Smoke and debris filled the entrance as they stepped through into the cavernous interior. What they found confirmed Izuku's assessment and justified his insistence on direct intervention. The warehouse had been converted into an operational center, with computer stations, medical equipment, and what appeared to be quirk research apparatus arranged around the periphery. In the center stood a raised platform where several figures had gathered: Shigaraki, Kurogiri, Dabi, Mr. Compress, and others Izuku recognized from intelligence briefings. But they weren't the primary concern. At the platform's center stood a tall figure in an immaculate dark suit, his face obscured by a complex life support mask. His presence dominated the space not through overt power display, but through the absolute stillness with which he observed their entrance. All for one. The legendary villain tilted his head slightly, the mask's respirator emitting a soft hiss as he studied the intruders. "Endeavor," he acknowledged, voice distorted but cultured. "How disappointing. I was expecting All Might." His masked face turned toward Izuku. "And the Soul Emperor. Your reputation precedes you, young man. Such interesting applications of soul manipulation. I've been looking forward to meeting you." Izuku assessed the situation with cold precision. All for One's casual demeanor suggested confidence rather than concern, despite the intrusion. The surrounding League members had tensed for combat but awaited direction rather than attacking immediately. Most significantly, the void in Izuku's soul perception emanated directly from All for One himself, confirmation that the villain possessed some countermeasure against soul-based abilities. "Surrender," Endeavor demanded, flames intensifying around his body. "You're outnumbered and reinforcements are incoming." All for One chuckled, the sound distorted through his mask. "Outnumbered?" Perhaps in the most literal sense, but hardly outmatched. He raised one hand casually. "I think a demonstration is in order." The air distorted around his arm as multiple quirks activated simultaneously. The warehouse floor erupted in massive spikes that forced Endeavor and Izuku to separate, while air cannons generated concussive force that slammed into Zeus with enough power to temporarily disperse the thundercloud. Endeavor recovered quickly, launching a Hell Spider attack that sent flame spears streaking toward All for One from multiple angles. The villain didn't move to evade, simply activating a barrier quirk that absorbed the flames completely. "Predictable," All for One commented. "You've always lacked Toshinori's creativity, Endeavor." While this exchange occurred, Izuku had redirected Prometheus toward the League members, creating a wall of flame that separated them from the main confrontation. Several attempted to circle around, but Napoleon extended to block their path, forcing them back. "You isolate my subordinates," All for One observed, turning his attention back to Izuku. "Tactical thinking. I appreciate that." Without warning, the villain launched forward with shocking speed, his right arm transforming into a massive impact weapon as he targeted Izuku directly. The attack came faster than even Izuku had anticipated, connecting with his chest before Zeus could fully reform to intercept. For the first time in years, Izuku felt genuine pain as his iron balloon defense partially failed under the specialized impact. He slid backward several meters, maintaining his footing, but recognizing the significant danger All for One represented. Impact nullification, coupled with kinetic booster and density manipulation, All for One explained conversationally, his arm returning to normal. "Specifically configured to counter your defensive abilities. My doctor provided excellent analysis of your quirk limitations. Izuku's response was immediate and calculated. Zeus reformed above him, discharging a concentrated lightning bolt directly at All for One, while Prometheus circled to attack from behind. The villain responded with casual efficiency, activating an insulation quirk against the electricity, while simultaneously generating wind pressure that disrupted Prometheus's approach. Endeavor, Izuku called, like maintaining focus on All for One. The League members are secondary priorities. Contain but don't pursue. The Flame Hero, already engaging Dabby and Mr. McCompress, nodded acknowledgement. He understood the strategic assessment. All for One was the primary threat, the others merely distractions. You coordinate well, first-time combatants, All for One noted, but cooperation requires trust, which requires predictability, a weakness I can exploit. He activated another combination of quirks, creating localized gravity distortions that pulled Endeavor off balance, while simultaneously launching precision air cannons at Izuku's position. The coordinated attack forced both heroes into defensive postures, allowing the League members to regroup and prepare a counteroffensive. All Might's expression showed momentary frustration before focusing on the immediate threat. All for One is beyond your current capabilities. Fall back and support Endeavor with the League containment. Before Izuku could respond, All for One chuckled. So protective of your students, Toshinori, even those who don't follow your heroic philosophy. He turned slightly toward Izuku. The Soul Emperor operates through fear and domination rather than inspiration, doesn't he? Much more aligned with my methods than yours. Don't listen to his manipulation, All Might warned. He excels at finding and exploiting divisions. No manipulation required when truth serves better, All for One countered smoothly. Young Midoriya extracts souls from his enemies, bending them to his will. He rules through power rather than consent. The differences are merely in scale and presentation, not fundamental approach. Izuku remained unmoved by the psychological tactic. Your assessment is flawed, he stated calmly. I offer choice. You take without consent. The distinction matters. Does it? All for One mused. How meaningful is choice when presented at the point of death? Life or death leaves only one rational option. He shook his head slightly. No, young Emperor, we are more alike than different. The primary distinction is that I acknowledge my nature while you disguise yours behind a hero's facade. All Might had heard enough. He launched forward with devastating speed, fist cocked back for his signature attack. Detroit Smash! All for One met the attack directly, his arm transforming into a complex combination of impact absorption and force redirection quirks. The collision generated a shockwave that shattered remaining windows and forced all others to brace against the pressure wave. Still leading with the same attack, All for One commented as they separated. Decades pass and you learn nothing new, Toshinori. What followed was a display of raw power that justified All Might's position as the symbol of peace. Despite his weakened condition and limited transformation time, he attacked with relentless determination, each strike carrying force that would have leveled buildings had it connected properly. But All for One countered each move with calculated precision, combining quirks and patterns that suggested intimate familiarity with All Might's fighting style. It quickly became apparent that the villain wasn't just defending. He was deliberately prolonging the confrontation, forcing All Might to expend his limited energy reserves. Izuku observed the exchange with analytical detachment, identifying patterns and weaknesses while Zeus and Prometheus regained full combat capability. All for One was formidable, but not invincible. His quirk combinations showed millisecond delays during transition, tiny vulnerabilities that could be exploited with perfect timing. More significantly, his soul protection appeared to fluctuate during intense quirk activation, suggesting the defense required conscious maintenance rather than passive operation. An opportunity was developing, but timing would be critical. All Might launched another devastating attack sequence, combining punches and kicks in a pattern designed to overwhelm through sheer volume. All for One defended effectively, but was forced to activate multiple quirks in rapid succession, each transition creating momentary vulnerability. Zeus, Prometheus, Izuku commanded quietly. Triangulation protocol. The homies moved into position, Zeus circling to All for One's left flank, while Prometheus positioned on the right. They began generating energy in a synchronized pattern, building toward a combined attack that would require split-second timing. Meanwhile, All Might's assault was showing diminishing returns. His movements had slowed fractionally, his breathing becoming labored as his transformation time neared its limit. All for One noticed the change immediately, his counterattacks becoming more aggressive as he sensed advantage. "You're reaching your limit, Toshinori," the villain observed, deflecting another punch before countering with an air cannon that struck All Might directly in the chest. "How much time remains? 2 minutes? Perhaps less?" All Might staggered slightly but maintained his fighting stance. "Enough to finish this," he declared, though the strain in his voice betrayed the reality of his condition. All for One shook his head almost regretfully. "No, old friend, not this time." He activated a complex combination of quirks, his right arm transforming into a massive weapon that combined aspects of multiple offensive abilities. "This ends now." As the villain prepared his final attack on All Might, Izuku gave the signal. Zeus and Prometheus released their accumulated energy simultaneously, targeting All for One from opposite sides. The villain detected the attack and activated defensive quirks, exactly as Izuku had anticipated. With All for One's attention divided between All Might and the homie assault, Izuku executed the real attack. Napoleon extended with perfect precision, its edge targeting not the villain's body but the respiratory apparatus of his mask. The blade connected, severing key components of the life support system. All for One immediately diverted quirk power to compensate, creating a momentary gap in his defensive coverage. The opening Izuku had been waiting for. He moved with calculated precision, closing the distance before All for One could reestablish full protection. His hand extended in the soul extraction gesture, fingers splayed as he made direct contact with the villain's chest. "Life or death?" Izuku asked, though the question was merely formality in this case. All for One attempted to activate his soul protection quirk, but the combination of respiratory disruption and divided attention created fatal delay. Izuku's power engaged, penetrating the villain's defenses and connecting directly with his soul. What he found there defied conventional understanding. All for One's soul was a complex tapestry of fragments, hundreds of quirk signatures interwoven with his original essence, each representing a stolen power integrated into his being. The structure was both magnificent and horrifying, a testament to centuries of quirk accumulation and integration. "Fascinating," Izuku murmured, genuinely impressed by the complexity he encountered. All for One struggled against the extraction, activating multiple quirks simultaneously in desperate attempt to break the connection. "You cannot comprehend what you touch," he gasped, voice strained without proper respiratory support. "My essence is beyond your understanding." "Not beyond," Izuku corrected calmly, "simply complex. But complexity can be dissected." He began the extraction process, carefully separating components of All for One's soul tapestry. Not the entirety, that would require time they didn't have, but strategic fragments representing key powers and vulnerabilities. All Might, recognizing what was happening, approached cautiously. "Young Midoriya," he began, uncertainty evident in his voice. "This method is necessary," Izuku completed. "His quirk structure makes conventional defeat temporary at best. This ensures permanence." All for One made a final, desperate attempt to break free, activating a self-destruction quirk that would have killed everyone in the vicinity. Izuku sensed the power building and immediately extracted that soul fragment completely, neutralizing the threat before it could manifest. "Predictable," he commented. "Destroy what you cannot control. Tactically sound, but ultimately futile." With methodical precision, Izuku continued extracting key soul fragments, each representing a significant quirk or capability. All for One's resistance weakened with each extraction, his centuries-old power complex being systematically dismantled by the Soul Emperor's methodical approach. "You don't understand what you're taking," All for One managed, his voice growing weaker. "These powers carry burdens, consequences." "I understand perfectly," Izuku replied. "Each quirk represents both capability and limitation. Integration requires adaptation. I'm well equipped for the process." As the extraction continued, the warehouse filled with additional heroes responding to Endeavor's earlier call for reinforcements. They secured League members while maintaining distance from the central confrontation, recognizing the historical significance of what was transpiring. All Might stood witness, his expression a complex mixture of relief, concern, and something approaching awe as he watched his greatest enemy systematically neutralized by methods beyond his own capabilities. Finally, when sufficient soul fragments had been extracted to render All for One functionally powerless, Izuku stepped back. The villain collapsed to his knees, his mask partially destroyed and his once imposing presence reduced to that of an ordinary, injured man. "Remarkable," All for One whispered, looking up at Izuku with what might have been respect behind his damaged mask. "You've accomplished what generations of heroes could not." A labored breath. "What will you do with what you've taken, I wonder?" "Use it appropriately," Izuku replied simply. All Might stepped forward, placing a hand on Izuku's shoulder. "It's over," he said, relief evident in his voice. "After all these years." Before he could continue, his transformation failed, muscle form collapsing into his emaciated true appearance. The abrupt change and accumulated battle damage caused him to stagger, blood appearing at the corner of his mouth. Izuku supported him immediately, preventing his collapse while maintaining vigilance on the subdued All for One. "Medical attention required," he stated, gesturing to nearby heroes. "Priority 1. As medical responders rushed forward, All Might looked at Izuku with newfound understanding. "Young Midoriya," he said quietly, "what you did today, your methods, were effective," Izuku completed. "Results matter, All Might." The symbol of peace didn't argue, perhaps recognizing the undeniable truth of the statement. All for One had been defeated, not temporarily contained or imprisoned, but fundamentally neutralized in a way that prevented future threat. The Soul Emperor's methods had succeeded where generations of conventional heroism had failed. As containment procedures were established and the injured received treatment, Izuku stood apart, processing the soul fragments he had extracted. Each contained tremendous power and knowledge, quirks accumulated over centuries, tactical understanding developed through countless confrontations, even historical perspectives from eras long past. Integration would require time and careful consideration, but the potential was undeniable. What All for One had accumulated for selfish domination, the Soul Emperor would repurpose for protection and stability. Zeus hovered nearby, electricity crackling with heightened intensity that reflected Izuku's internal state. Prometheus burned brighter than before, its flames taking on new hues that suggested enhanced capabilities. Napoleon's edge gleamed with sharper definition, the sword homie seemingly eager to test its improved potential. As heroes secured the scene and media began gathering outside the police perimeter, Izuku sensed a new presence approaching, powerful, confident, distinctive in its soul signature. Mirko, the rabbit hero, landed gracefully nearby, her athletic form tense with combat readiness that relaxed only slightly as she surveyed the aftermath. "Heard you took down the big bad while the rest of us were chasing decoys," she said, crimson eyes evaluating him with newfound interest. "Impressive work, Soul Emperor." Izuku met her gaze directly. "You would have done the same given the opportunity." A sharp-toothed grin spread across her features. "Damn right I would have." She stepped closer, studying the subdued All for One with professional assessment. "They're saying you didn't just beat him, you took his power. That true?" "Partially," Izuku acknowledged. "Key capabilities only. Full integration would be inefficient." Mirko laughed, the sound surprisingly genuine amid the destruction. "You talk about absorbing the powers of the greatest villain in history like it's a homework assignment." She shook her head, white hair shifting with the movement. "You're something else, kid." Before Izuku could respond, Commissioner Yamada approached, her earlier disapproval now tempered with reluctant acknowledgement. "Midoriya," she began formally, "the Commission will need a complete debriefing regarding your methods during this operation." "Of course," Izuku agreed, though I should note that those methods directly resulted in All for One's permanent neutralization, a goal Hero Society has pursued unsuccessfully for generations. The Commissioner's expression tightened at the implicit challenge. Results don't automatically justify means. There are protocols, ethical considerations. "Oh, give it a rest," Mirko interrupted, stepping between them with casual confidence. "The kid just did what every top hero has failed to do for a century. Your protocols didn't accomplish that." Commissioner Yamada's gaze shifted to the rabbit hero with clear disapproval. Number 5 should understand the importance of maintaining proper hero conduct standards, Mirko. Number 5 understands getting results, Mirko countered, crossing her toned arms. The Soul Emperor delivered. Everything else is bureaucratic hand-wringing. The exchange highlighted the fundamental division that had always existed within hero society, between those who prioritized results and those who emphasized process. The Soul Emperor had forced this tension into the open by achieving what conventional methods could not. We'll discuss this further at headquarters, the commissioner stated finally, recognizing that the post-operation scene wasn't the place for such fundamental debates. For now, Midoriya is to remain under observation while the extracted abilities are documented and assessed. After she departed to coordinate further containment procedures, Mirko turned back to Izuku with undisguised interest. So what happens now, Soul Emperor? After taking down the final boss, everything else must seem pretty anticlimactic. Izuku considered the question seriously. With All for One neutralized and key fragments of his power integrated into the Soul Emperor's capabilities, conventional hero operations did indeed seem insufficient for his evolved potential. Adaptation, he replied finally. My capabilities have expanded beyond standard hero parameters. Application requires appropriate context. Mirko's eyes narrowed thoughtfully, meaning you're thinking bigger than just punching villains and saving civilians. Precisely, Izuku confirmed. Conventional heroism addresses symptoms rather than causes. With enhanced capabilities, more fundamental solutions become possible. A slow smile spread across the rabbit hero's features. Now that sounds interesting. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. When you're ready to discuss those fundamental solutions, look me up. I've got some ideas of my own about how the system could use improvement. The offer was unexpected but intriguing. Mirko had always operated independently, following her own code rather than conforming to Hero Society's public relations-focused approach. Her combat prowess and strategic thinking were well documented, making her a potentially valuable ally for what Izuku now envisioned. I will, he promised. As containment operations concluded and All for One was secured for transport to a specialized facility, Izuku surveyed the aftermath with newfound clarity. The raid had succeeded beyond anyone's expectations, neutralizing the greatest threat to Hero Society while simultaneously proving the effectiveness of the Soul Emperor's methods. But this wasn't an ending, merely a transition point. With All for One's power partially integrated and new allies like Mirko showing interest in his approach, the true potential of the Soul Emperor was just beginning to manifest. The hero world would need to adapt to this new reality. Izuku Midoriya intended to ensure that adaptation proceeded in the right direction, with or without their willing participation. The weeks following All for One's defeat brought significant changes to Hero Society. Media coverage focused intensely on the Kamino incident, with particular emphasis on the Soul Emperor's decisive role. Public opinion divided sharply. Many celebrated the permanent neutralization of Japan's greatest villain, while others expressed concern about the methods employed and their implications for hero conduct standards. Izuku observed these developments with detached interest while focusing on integration of the extracted soul fragments. Each represented not just quirk capability, but accumulated knowledge and experience, tactical insights, historical perspective, even scientific understanding that All for One had gathered over his extended lifetime. The process required careful compartmentalization to prevent personality bleed-through, a risk Izuku had anticipated and prepared for through meditative techniques developed specifically for this purpose. Zeus, Prometheus, and Napoleon assisted, their own soul structures providing stabilizing frameworks for the new fragments. UA had granted him extended leave for quirk development and recovery, though the arrangement was clearly designed to create distance until the public relations implications stabilized. Principal Nezu, ever the pragmatist, recognized both the value of Izuku's contribution and the complicated questions it raised about hero education standards. Izuku used this time productively, establishing a private training facility in an abandoned industrial complex where he could experiment with his enhanced capabilities without observation or interference. It was here that Mirko found him 3 weeks after the Camino incident, arriving unannounced but not unexpected. "Impressive setup," the Rabbit Hero commented, surveying the repurposed warehouse with professional assessment. Training drones, some partially destroyed, littered one section, while complex analytical equipment occupied another. "Self-funded? Soul Emperor operations generate significant income," Izuku confirmed, dismissing a small experimental homie he'd been developing. "Financial compensation for villain captures accumulates when you don't maintain an agency infrastructure." Mirko grinned, leaning against a support column with casual confidence. "Smart. No overhead, no sidekicks to manage, no paperwork beyond the basics." She studied him with renewed interest. "So, how's the integration going? Feeling all-powerful yet?" "Integration proceeds efficiently," Izuku replied, "though power isn't the primary benefit." "No?" Mirko raised an eyebrow skeptically. "What is, then?" "Perspective," Izuku explained. "All-for-one accumulated knowledge across generations. Historical context most modern analysis lacks. Patterns in societal development and quirk evolution that suggest future trajectories." "And what trajectories are those?" Mirko asked, genuine curiosity replacing her usual bravado. Izuku gestured toward a digital display where complex data patterns shifted and evolved. "Hero society is fundamentally reactive, responding to villains rather than addressing the conditions that create them. This approach ensures continuous conflict without resolution." "Not exactly a revolutionary insight," Mirko noted. "Any experienced hero knows we're treating symptoms rather than causes." "The difference," Izuku continued, "is that I now possess both the understanding and capability to implement systematic change rather than merely recognizing the problem." Mirko pushed off from the column, approaching the display with heightened interest. "What kind of systematic change are we talking about?" "Territorial stabilization," Izuku replied. "Establishing a controlled environment where preventative measures replace reactive response. A demonstration model for alternative social organization." "You're talking about claiming territory," Mirko translated, crimson eyes sharp with understanding. "Setting up your own little kingdom where you make the rules." "Functional protectorate," Izuku corrected, "with demonstrable improvements in security and quality of life compared to conventional governance." Mirko circled him slowly, evaluating this ambition with professional assessment. "The Commission would never sanction that. Even with your elevated status after Camino, they'd classify it as vigilantism at best, villainy at worst." "Their sanction is unnecessary," Izuku stated simply. "Results will provide retroactive legitimacy." A slow smile spread across Mirko's features. "You really don't think small, do you?" She completed her circuit, stopping directly in front of him. "So why tell me, what's my role in this grand vision?" Izuku met her gaze directly. "You operate through direct action rather than institutional approval. Your combat capabilities rank among the highest in the hero registry. Most importantly, you understand that effective protection sometimes requires methods beyond conventional heroism." "You're recruiting me," Mirko concluded, amusement and interest mingling in her expression. "Offering partnership," Izuku clarified. "Establishing an effective protectorate requires complementary capabilities. Your combat specialization and territorial instincts would enhance operational effectiveness significantly." Mirko laughed, the sound echoing through the warehouse. "That's the most clinical recruitment pitch I've ever heard." She shook her head, white hair shifting with the movement. "Most men try to impress me with displays of strength or charm. You offer complementary capabilities and operational effectiveness." "Accuracy matters more than presentation," Izuku replied, unmoved by her amusement. "Fair enough," Mirko acknowledged, her expression becoming more serious. "So where is this protectorate going to be? You can't just claim a chunk of Japan without triggering immediate government response." "Not Japan," Izuku confirmed. "An unclaimed volcanic island in international waters, approximately 300 kilometers southeast of the main archipelago. Recently formed, still classified as geologically unstable, but actually suitable for development with appropriate quirk application." He activated a holographic display showing the island in question, a rough volcanic formation approximately 7 kilometers in diameter with a dormant caldera at its center. Satellite imagery revealed black sand beaches and minimal vegetation, consistent with recent geological origin. No existing governance, no displaced population, no jurisdictional complications, Izuku explained. Perfect for establishing proof of concept without immediate interference. Mirko studied the display with growing interest. And how exactly do you plan to transform a barren volcanic rock into a habitable protectorate? In response, Izuku gestured, and a new homie materialized beside him, different from his combat trio, with an earthen, molten appearance that shifted and flowed like semi-solid lava. Terra, he introduced. Environmental manipulation specialization created from combination of All for One's geological quirks and existing homie framework, capable of land stabilization, soil enrichment, and structural formation. The homie pulsed with reddish-orange energy, demonstrating its capabilities by reshaping a section of the warehouse floor into complex geometric patterns before returning it to normal. That's... Mirko paused, genuine surprise replacing her usual confident demeanor. That's actually impressive. You created a terraforming homie. One of several specialized applications developed from integrated fragments, Izuku confirmed. Conventional hero operations waste potential by focusing exclusively on combat applications. Environmental control, infrastructure development, resource management, all possible with appropriate quirk utilization. Mirko's expression shifted from surprise to genuine consideration as she processed the implications. You're serious about this, creating your own territory, establishing a new model for security and social organization. Entirely serious, Izuku confirmed. The question is whether you're interested in participating. The rabbit hero was silent for a moment, weighing opportunities against risks with the tactical assessment that had made her one of Japan's top heroes despite her independent approach. Finally, she grinned, sharp canines visible in the expression. You know what? I am interested. She stepped closer, crimson eyes locked with his. The hero system's been broken for years. Too much bureaucracy, too many restrictions, too focused on appearances rather than results. If you're offering a chance to build something better from scratch, count me in. Izuku nodded, accepting her decision without visible emotion, though internally acknowledging the significant tactical advantage her participation represented. Mirko's combat capabilities would provide essential security during the establishment phase, while her independent reputation would lend credibility to the project among certain hero factions. When do we start? Mirko asked, energy practically radiating from her athletic form as she contemplated this new challenge. Immediately, Izuku replied. Initial survey and preparation begins tomorrow. Zeus can transport us to the island location for preliminary assessment. Mirko laughed again, the sound containing genuine excitement. Moving fast, I see. Good. I hate waiting around once a decision's been made. She surveyed the warehouse again, noting the extensive preparations already in progress. You were pretty confident I'd agree, weren't you? I calculated a 73% probability of acceptance based on your operational history and public statements regarding hero system limitations, Izuku acknowledged. Though certainty was impossible without direct discussion. 73%, huh? Mirko shook her head, amused rather than offended by his analytical approach. What happens now? Do we submit some kind of formal declaration to the commission, or just start building and deal with the fallout later? Initial development proceeds without announcement, Izuku explained. Establishing basic infrastructure and security systems before official notice maximizes operational flexibility. Once demonstrable progress exists, formal communication becomes more effective. In other words, ask forgiveness rather than permission, Mirko translated with approval. I like it. Creates momentum they can't easily reverse. The following days unfolded with methodical efficiency as Izuku and Mirko began implementing the first phase of what would become known as the Sovereign Protectorate. Zeus transported them to the volcanic island, where Terra immediately began stabilization work, cooling active lava flows, solidifying unstable terrain, and creating the foundation for future development. Mirko, initially skeptical about the ambitious timeline, became increasingly invested as tangible progress emerged. Her combat instincts translated effectively to practical problem-solving, identifying potential vulnerabilities in proposed structures and suggesting modifications based on defensive considerations. You need elevated observation points here, here, and here, she advised, marking locations on the holographic island model Izuku had created. Clear sightlines covering all approach vectors, no blind spots. Izuku incorporated her suggestions without argument, recognizing the tactical validity. Their working relationship developed with surprising efficiency, his strategic planning complemented by her practical experience, his methodical approach balanced by her decisive action. By the end of the first week, the island had transformed significantly. Terra had created a stable central plateau where initial structures were taking form, while channeling the dormant volcanic energy into controlled geothermal systems that would eventually provide sustainable power. Zeus assisted by generating precise lightning strikes that vitrified sand into glass-like building materials, while Prometheus provided controlled heat for more complex fabrication processes. The construction accelerated with the introduction of additional specialized homies. Architect, formed from extracted construction quirks, and cultivator, designed specifically for rapid vegetation establishment and agricultural development. Working in concert, they transformed barren volcanic rock into the foundation of a habitable territory with remarkable speed. Throughout this process, Izuku continued integrating and refining the capabilities extracted from All for One, systematically testing each application before implementing it in the larger development. Mirko observed these experiments with growing appreciation for the methodical precision behind the Soul Emperor's seemingly overwhelming power. "You could have just used brute force for most of this," she noted on their 10th day, watching as Izuku directed Terra and Architect to create a complex harbor structure that would eventually allow sea access. "But you're optimizing everything, testing variables, refining approaches. Efficiency matters more than display," Izuku replied simply. "Wasted energy reduces operational capacity." Mirko grinned, punching his shoulder lightly, a gesture of camaraderie that had become more frequent as they worked together. "And that right there is why I signed on. Most powerful heroes I know would be showing off, creating massive structures just because they could. You're building something that actually works." As the Protectorate's physical infrastructure developed, Izuku began implementing the security and governance systems that would define its operation. Drawing on All for One's accumulated knowledge of societal structures throughout quirk history, he designed protocols that emphasize prevention over punishment, integration over isolation, and practical results over procedural compliance. No traditional police force, he explained as they refined the security framework. Homie-based monitoring with human oversight provides more consistent coverage with fewer personality variables. Intervention occurs before crimes manifest rather than after damage occurs. Predictive enforcement, Mirko translated, considering the implications. That'll raise ethical concerns about presumption of guilt. The approach isn't punitive, but preventative, Izuku clarified. Intervention takes form of opportunity adjustment rather than preemptive punishment, creating alternatives rather than imposing restrictions. The concept represented a fundamental departure from conventional criminal justice systems, addressing root causes through environmental and situational modification rather than deterrence through threatened consequences. It reflected the Soul Emperor's broader philosophy that behavioral control through external force was less efficient than behavioral guidance through environmental design. As the Protectorate's physical development reached critical mass, basic infrastructure established, initial security systems operational, sustainable resource management implemented, the question of public announcement became increasingly relevant. "We can't stay under the radar much longer," Mirko noted on their 18th day, surveying the transformed island from the central observation tower. "Satellite imaging will have detected the changes by now. Someone in the government or commission has noticed." "Correct," Izuku acknowledged. "Initial contact has already occurred." Mirko turned sharply. "What? When?" "Yesterday," Izuku replied. "A commissioned scout vessel approached the southern perimeter. I intercepted and provided preliminary information regarding the Protectorate's purpose and operational parameters." "And you didn't think to mention this?" Mirko demanded, her usual directness intensified by genuine surprise. The interaction was preliminary and non-consequential," Izuku explained. "They requested formal communication with Hero Society leadership within 72 hours. I agreed." Mirko stared at him for a moment before laughing in disbelief. "You really are something else, Soul Emperor. Most people would consider first contact with authorities about our unauthorized island nation kind of important to mention. It was proceeding according to anticipated timelines, Izuku replied simply. No adjustment to operational procedures was required. This exchange highlighted a fundamental difference in their approaches that had become apparent during their partnership. Izuku's calculated precision viewed events through their strategic relevance rather than social or emotional significance, while Mirko operated through more instinctive assessment that incorporated both practical and interpersonal dimensions. Surprisingly, these differences strengthened their collaboration rather than undermining it. Mirko increasingly translated Izuku's clinical assessments into more accessible frameworks, while Izuku provided analytical depth to Mirko's intuitive judgments. The formal communication with Hero Society leadership occurred exactly as scheduled, a video conference connecting the Protectorate's newly established command center with the Hero Commission headquarters. Commissioner Yamada led the official delegation, with All Might, Endeavor, and several other top heroes present in advisory capacity. Midoriya, the commissioner, began, her tone professionally neutral despite the clearly unusual circumstances. And Rabbit Hero Mirko, your construction project has attracted significant attention. As intended, Izuku replied. The Sovereign Protectorate represents a practical demonstration of enhanced security and social organization methodologies. Sovereign Protectorate, the commissioner repeated, emphasizing the terminology. You've claimed an unclaimed territory and established what appears to be an independent governance structure without any authorization from existing authorities. International waters, Mirko interjected. No authorization required under maritime law for unclaimed volcanic formations. We've verified the legal framework extensively. The commissioner's expression tightened slightly. Legal technicalities aside, this operation falls outside established hero protocols and licensing parameters. The Commission cannot sanction what amounts to establishment of an independent territory by active heroes. Sanction isn't requested, Izuku stated plainly. This notification is courtesy rather than permission-seeking. The Protectorate will proceed regardless of Commission position. This directness created visible tension among the hero leadership. Endeavor's flames intensified momentarily while several others exchanged concerned glances. Only All Might's expression remained thoughtful rather than alarmed, his sunken eyes studying Izuku with analytical intensity. Young Midoriya, the symbol of peace said finally. What exactly are you trying to accomplish with this Protectorate? Demonstration of effective alternatives to current hero systems, Izuku explained. Conventional heroism addresses symptoms rather than causes, creating perpetual cycles of villain emergence and hero response. The Protectorate implements preventative methodologies that reduce necessity for reactive intervention. And you believe you have the right to unilaterally implement such alternatives? The Commissioner challenged. Rights derive from capability and application, Izuku replied. The Soul Emperor's methods proved effective against threats conventional heroism failed to address. All for One's defeat demonstrated this conclusively. The Protectorate extends this effectiveness to societal organization rather than limiting it to combat application. The blunt assessment created uncomfortable silence among the hero leadership. All for One's defeat had indeed validated Izuku's methods in ways that made conventional objections difficult to sustain. The Soul Emperor had accomplished what generations of traditional heroes could not, creating an implicit challenge to the very system that had defined heroism since quirks emerged. There are processes for proposing reforms, the Commissioner said finally, though her tone lacked conviction. Establishing an unauthorized territory isn't the appropriate approach for implementing new methodologies. Processes designed by existing systems perpetuate those systems by definition, Izuku countered. Meaningful reform requires demonstration outside existing constraints. Before the Commissioner could respond, Mirko leaned forward. Look, we all know the hero system has problems. Reactive response, bureaucratic limitations, arbitrary restrictions on effective methods. The Soul Emperor and I are building something that works better. You can fight us on principle, or you can watch and learn from what we accomplish. The directness of this approach, characteristic of Mirko's uncompromising style, shifted the conversation's dynamic. Several heroes, particularly those who had worked with the Rabbit Hero previously, showed subtle signs of reconsideration. All Might broke the tension with an unexpected question. This protectorate of yours, will it accept visitors? Observers who might learn from your methods? Controlled observation is anticipated and welcomed, Izuku confirmed. Transparent demonstration of effectiveness serves the protectorate's purpose. This opening created a pathway for de-escalation. After further discussion regarding operational parameters and international legal considerations, the conference concluded with reluctant acknowledgement of the protectorate's existence, if not formal approval of its methods. They'll try to undermine us through regulatory challenges and public relations campaigns, Mirko predicted as the connection terminated. Probably already drafting new international laws about unauthorized territorial claims by quirk users or something similar. Expected and irrelevant, Izuku replied. Legal challenges require enforcement capacity. Their practical options are limited against our combined capabilities. Mirko grinned, stretching her athletic form after the tense meeting. That's what I like about you, Soul Emperor. You cut through the bullshit and focus on practical reality. She surveyed the command center with evident satisfaction. So what's next for our little revolution? Accelerated development, Izuku stated. Public announcement will attract attention from multiple factions: governmental, heroic, civilian, and villainous. Completing core infrastructure where significant response materializes optimizes our position. The following weeks validated this assessment as the Protectorate's existence became public knowledge, generating intense media coverage and divided reactions across the hero community. Some praised the innovation and courage required to challenge established systems, while others condemned what they viewed as dangerous vigilantism masquerading as reform. Throughout this external controversy, internal development proceeded with remarkable efficiency. Terra, Architect, and other specialized homies transformed the volcanic island into an increasingly sophisticated habitat, with residential zones, agricultural areas, energy production facilities, and comprehensive security systems taking form with methodical precision. Mirko's contribute evolved beyond security planning to include broader operational input. Her practical experience with hero system limitations informed governance protocols, creating more nuanced approaches than Izuku's purely analytical models might have developed independently. You need to account for emotional factors, she explained during a particularly intense planning session. People don't make decisions based solely on logical assessment. They respond to feelings of security, belonging, and purpose. Your systems need to address those needs, not just physical safety. Izuku considered this perspective carefully before incorporating modifications that balanced efficiency with psychological comfort, wider pathways despite spatial inefficiency, natural elements integrated into structural designs, community spaces that served social functions beyond practical necessity. As the Protectorate approached operational readiness, the question of population became increasingly relevant. An effective demonstration required inhabitants beyond its founders, people who would live under the protective systems and validate their effectiveness through practical experience. We can't just recruit randomly, Mirko noted as they discussed this challenge. Initial participants need to understand what they're joining, a proving ground for new approaches, not just a convenient place to live. Agreed, Izuku confirmed. Selection criteria emphasize alignment with Protectorate objectives, while maintaining demographic diversity for valid demonstration parameters. The recruitment process began carefully, focusing initially on individuals whose experiences with conventional systems had demonstrated their limitations. Former victims of villain attacks inadequately protected by traditional hero response, researchers whose work on alternative security methodologies faced institutional resistance, even reformed former villains whose criminal paths resulted from systemic failures rather than inherent malice. Each potential resident underwent thorough assessment, with Izuku personally evaluating soul signatures for compatibility with Protectorate principles. This approach generated predictable controversy among conventional authorities who characterized it as invasive and potentially discriminatory. Mirko addressed these criticisms with characteristic directness in media appearances, challenging critics to compare actual outcomes rather than objecting to methods. Judged by results, she stated during a particularly contentious interview, the Protectorate has 0 crime, 0 villain attacks, and 0 civilian casualties since establishment. Show me a conventional city with that record. This results-focused approach gained traction among pragmatic observers, particularly as initial residents began sharing their experiences through various media channels. The Protectorate's comprehensive security, resource abundance, and absence of bureaucratic obstacles created living conditions that compared favorably to conventional society by nearly every measurable metric. As the population grew and systems demonstrated sustained effectiveness, a new phase of the Protectorate's development emerged: external relations with established governments and hero organizations. Initial hostility gradually shifted toward cautious engagement as practical reality overcame ideological resistance. The Commission is requesting formal diplomatic relations, Izuku noted approximately 3 months after establishment. Their representatives suggested regular consultation regarding shared security concerns. Mirko laughed, shaking her head as they reviewed the request in the command center. Translation: they're tired of fighting what works and want to save face by pretending they supported it all along. Political adaptation, Izuku acknowledged, expected and tactically advantageous. Their partnership had deepened throughout the Protectorate's development, evolving from professional collaboration into something more complex. Mirko's direct nature complemented Izuku's analytical approach, creating balanced leadership that resonated with residents while presenting unified authority to external entities. This partnership extended beyond operational coordination to personal connection, an unexpected development for the typically detached Soul Emperor, but one that enhanced rather than compromised effectiveness. Mirko's emotional intelligence balanced Izuku's tactical precision, while his strategic vision provided direction for her boundless energy. On the Protectorate's 100th day of operation, they stood together on the observation platform, overlooking what had become a thriving community. The volcanic island had transformed completely. Lush vegetation covered once barren slopes, elegant structures rose from the central plateau, and residents moved with purpose through carefully designed spaces that emphasized both efficiency and quality of life. "We actually did it," Mirko said quietly, surveying their creation with uncharacteristic reflectiveness. "Built something that works better than the system we came from." Izuku nodded, Zeus hovering at his shoulder while Prometheus cast warm light across the evening landscape. Functional proof of concept, the beginning rather than completion. Mirko turned toward him, crimson eyes studying his expression with the directness that defined her approach to everything. "And what comes next? Soul Emperor? Expansion? Replication? Converting the rest of the world to our model?" "Organic development," Izuku replied. "The Protectorate demonstrates viability. Others will adapt or become obsolete through comparative ineffectiveness." "Evolution rather than revolution," Mirko translated, a smile playing at her lips. "Patient for someone with your power level." "Power without strategic application wastes potential," Izuku stated simply. Mirko laughed, the sound carrying across the observation platform. "And that right there is why this works." She gestured toward the thriving community below. "You could have forced change, dominated through raw power. Instead, you built something better and let results speak for themselves." Her expression shifted, becoming more serious as she moved closer. "That's why I'm here, you know? Not just because your methods get results, but because you understand power isn't just about what you can destroy, it's about what you can create." The observation reflected a fundamental truth about their partnership that had emerged through shared purpose and complementary approaches. Where others saw the Soul Emperor as merely a superior combat force, Mirko recognized the strategic vision that directed that power toward constructive rather than simply destructive ends. As darkness fell and the Protectorate's lights created patterns across the transformed landscape, Zeus, Prometheus, and Napoleon positioned themselves around their creator in ceremonial formation. The homies had evolved alongside Izuku, incorporating aspects of the extracted soul fragments while maintaining their distinctive characteristics. Behind them, Terra shaped the observation platform's edge into an elegant railing, while Architect refined structural elements with subtle adjustments that enhanced both form and function. Other specialized homies moved through the community below, maintaining systems and providing security with quiet efficiency. In this moment of reflection, with the sovereign protectorate functioning as envisioned, and Mirko's partnership established as its core strength, Izuku Midoriya, the Soul Emperor, had achieved something beyond mere victory over villains or accumulation of power. He had created a working alternative to a flawed system, demonstrating through practical results rather than theoretical argument that his methods offered genuine improvement. The hero world might continue to debate the ethics of soul extraction or question the establishment of independent territory, but they could not deny the effectiveness of what he had built. As commission representatives approached the island for their scheduled diplomatic meeting, visible as lights on the horizon, Izuku and Mirko stood together, not as conventional heroes bound by institutional limitations, but as architects of a new approach to security and governance that challenged fundamental assumptions about how society could function. The Soul Emperor had evolved beyond mere combat supremacy to demonstrate a more profound form of power, the ability to create systems that worked better than those they replaced. With Mirko beside him, complementing his vision with her uncompromising directness, he had established not just a territory, but a proving ground for a different future. Let the hero world come and see what they had built. The results would speak for themselves, more eloquently than any argument or justification. And in time, the approach pioneered in this volcanic outpost would spread, not through conquest or coercion, but through the irresistible logic of demonstrated effectiveness. The Soul Emperor's true legacy would not be the villains defeated or the battles won, but the alternative path he had created, a way forward that recognized power's highest purpose was not domination, but transformation. With Zeus, Prometheus, and Napoleon at his command, All for One's knowledge integrated into his capabilities, and Mirko's partnership strengthening his vision, Izuku Midoriya had become something beyond hero or villain. He had become inevitable progress, as unstoppable as evolution itself.
First off, massive love to the pro-hero tier supporters, the ones keeping the foundation strong. Javon McQuire. Next up, the symbol of peace tier. You legends are the backbone of this channel, and every story shines brighter because of you. Huge thanks to Jan, X0 Hope 3656, Devin Black, Rowdy Rich, Bionitarius V, King of the Pirates, Crow, Daniel Sharp, Roberto Ramos de Cristina, Dasher Games, Joe Bros, Aiden Schmidt, Mason Edwards, Ray Von Crimson River, Dante Alastor, Fable, Adam Yonkers, Blood Saints, MJ Brown, Omar Cousin, Donna Cathay, Zeph, KC, Assassin 24, Howie 60, Ignacio, Albert, Carlos Terry, Raphael Terran, Kevin Hall, and finally, saving the best for last, the Hope of the Universe tier. You are the ones carrying this channel to heights I never thought possible. The ultimate legends. Big Fro Pro, Juan, I'm Calver, Colsey. Thank you all for making these what-if stories real. Without you, this community wouldn't exist. Much love, and let's keep rewriting destiny together. Your soul belongs to me now. Imagine hearing those words from the boy who once cried saving a bully. As Deku himself said, I want to save everyone. But what if saving some meant sacrificing others? With Big Mom's power, every victory comes with a life or death choice. Could our cinnamon roll hero handle deciding who deserves to live? What other terrifying power combinations would break your favorite characters? Tell me in the comments, whose soul would you trade for ultimate power? Hit that subscribe button before I steal your lifespan. Thanks for watching, and remember, in this world, It's always life or death.